Victor Russo had buried men alive without flinching. He'd stared down loaded guns with cold indifference. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the moment he saw her across JFK's Terminal 4. Elena Hayes, his ex-wife, the woman he'd destroyed to save. She looked like she'd been through hell itself, dark circles carved beneath her eyes, her body swaying with exhaustion. And at her feet, strapped into two infant carriers, were babies. Twins. His world stopped. His breath caught. Because in that single, devastating instant, Victor understood that the past he'd tried to erase had just walked back into his life, with a truth he could never outrun. Okay. Before we dive into this story of sacrifice, secrets, and second chances, if you're enjoying what you hear, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's begin. The International Arrivals Terminal at John F. Kennedy Airport hummed with the chaotic energy of 1,000 reunions and departures. Businessmen rushed past with rolling luggage, their phones pressed to their ears as they barked orders to unseen subordinates. Families clustered around the arrival boards, children bouncing with anticipation as they waited for loved ones to emerge from customs. The PA system crackled overhead, announcing delays and gate changes in that peculiar monotone that somehow managed to sound both urgent and completely indifferent. Victor Russo moved through this chaos like a shadow, his presence creating an invisible wake. People instinctively stepped aside as he passed, though most couldn't have explained why. He wasn't particularly tall, just over 6 feet, but there was something about the way he carried himself that commanded space. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, the kind of expensive simplicity that whispered rather than shouted wealth. Dark hair threaded with premature silver swept back from a face that could have been carved from Roman marble. All sharp angles and uncompromising lines. His eyes, a cold gunmetal gray, scanned the crowd with the systematic efficiency of a predator cataloging prey. He'd just returned from Moscow, where negotiations with the Volkov family had finally concluded after 3 months of careful maneuvering. The deal would expand his operations into Eastern Europe, opening supply chains that would triple his revenue within the year. It should have felt like a victory. It should have felt like something. Instead, Victor felt nothing at all. He'd become very good at feeling nothing over the past 9 months. It was safer that way. Cleaner. Emotions were liabilities in his world, weaknesses that got you killed or worse, got the people you cared about killed. So he'd excise them with surgical precision, cutting away anything that made him vulnerable until all that remained was the cold, efficient machine his enemies feared and his associates respected. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably Marco checking in, confirming the shipment had cleared customs without incident. Victor ignored it. Marco could wait. Everything could wait. Right now, all he wanted was to get home, pour himself 3 fingers of the Macallan 25 that waited in his penthouse, and sleep for 12 hours straight. He was 20 feet from the exit when he saw her. At first, his brain refused to process the information. It was impossible. Elena was in Boston, safely tucked away in the life he'd forced her to build without him. She wouldn't be here, wouldn't be in New York, wouldn't be... But it was her. Elena Hayes stood near gate 27, and Victor's world tilted on its axis. She looked nothing like the woman he'd married 3 years ago. That Elena had been vibrant, alive, her dark eyes sparkling with the kind of optimism Victor had forgotten existed. She'd moved through the world with graceful confidence, her laughter a sound that could cut through his darkest moods and make him believe, just for a moment, that he could be something other than what he was. This Elena looked like she'd been hollowed out from the inside. Her chestnut hair, once glossy and thick, hung limp around her face. She'd lost weight, too much weight, her cheekbones standing out in sharp relief beneath skin that looked paper-thin. Dark circles carved shadows beneath her eyes, purple-black bruises that spoke of sleepless nights and bone-deep exhaustion. She wore jeans that hung loose on her frame and a wrinkled sweater that had seen better days. Everything about her screamed defeat. Victor's chest constricted, something he thought he'd successfully killed stirring painfully back to life. And then he saw them. At her feet, strapped into 2 infant carriers, were babies, twins. The world stopped. Not slowed, not paused. Stopped. The chaos of the airport faded to white noise. The crowds disappeared. The announcements became meaningless static. All that existed was Elena, those two infant carriers, and the truth that was currently reshaping Victor's entire understanding of reality. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the single devastating realization that was currently tearing through every carefully constructed wall he'd built over the past 9 months. She'd been pregnant. When he'd divorced her with brutal efficiency, when he'd cut her out of his life with surgical cruelty, when he'd forced her to hate him because hatred was safer than love, she'd been carrying his children. The twins couldn't have been more than a few months old. He could see tiny fists waving above the carriers, could see the gentle rise and fall of impossibly small chests. One wore blue, the other pink, though from this distance he couldn't make out their features. Victor's legs moved without conscious thought, carrying him closer even as his mind screamed at him to run, to leave, to maintain the distance that had kept her safe for 9 months. Elena was fumbling with a diaper bag, trying to sling it over her shoulder while simultaneously bending to adjust one of the carriers. She moved with the jerky, uncoordinated motions of someone running on fumes, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. A bottle slipped from the bag's side pocket and rolled across the floor. She didn't even notice. Victor bent and picked it up before he could stop himself, his body acting on instincts he'd thought he'd successfully buried. The bottle was warm, recently used, decorated with cheerful cartoon elephants that seemed obscenely innocent given everything else. "You dropped this." His voice came out rougher than he'd intended, scraped raw by 9 months of silence and the shock currently flooding his system. Elena froze. It was absolute total stillness, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks or a bomb detonates. Her hand, halfway to the carrier's handle, locked in place. Her shoulders went rigid. Even her breathing seemed to stop. Slowly, with the mechanical precision of someone operating a body they no longer fully controlled, Elena straightened and turned. Their eyes met for the first time in 9 months. Victor had forgotten how expressive her eyes were. He'd trained himself to forget, had deliberately excised the memory because remembering was too dangerous, too painful, too much of a liability. But now, staring into those dark brown depths, every detail came flooding back with crystal clarity. He'd forgotten the way her eyes changed color in different light, almost black in shadow, warm amber in sunlight. He'd forgotten the way they crinkled at the corners when she laughed, the way they could convey entire conversations without a single word being spoken. He'd forgotten how they'd looked on their wedding day, shining with tears and joy, and a future he'd already known he couldn't give her. Now they looked at him with something far worse than hatred. They looked at him with nothing at all. "Victor." Her voice was flat, emotionless, the verbal equivalent of a door slamming shut. "I didn't know you'd be here." He should leave, should turn around and walk away, should maintain the distance that had kept her alive for 9 months. But his feet refused to move, rooted to the industrial carpet as effectively as if they'd been set in concrete. "I just landed from Moscow." The words felt inadequate, absurd given the circumstances. What the hell did his travel itinerary matter when she was standing there with 2 infants at her feet? "Elena, are you—" "I'm fine." She cut him off with surgical precision, reaching down to grab the handle of the nearest carrier. "We're fine. Thank you for the bottle." She took it from his hand without letting their fingers touch, a deliberate avoidance that felt like a physical blow. "Those babies!" Victor's voice came out strangled. "Elena, how old—" "Not your concern." Her tone could have frozen nitrogen. "We were just leaving. Excuse me." She bent to grab the second carrier, and Victor saw her hand shake, saw the way her entire body trembled with exhaustion, saw the moment her knees started to buckle under the combined weight of the carriers and everything else she was carrying. He moved without thinking, his hands closing around the handle of the second carrier before she could collapse. "Let me help." "I don't need your help." But her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. "Elena." He kept his voice low, aware that they were starting to draw attention. A woman with a stroller had slowed down, watching them with undisguised curiosity. An airport security guard was looking their way, his hand resting casually on his radio. "Please, just let me carry this to your car." She looked up at him, and for just a moment, the careful blankness in her eyes cracked. What lay beneath it made Victor's chest constrict all over again. Pain. Bone-deep, soul-crushing pain, layered over with exhaustion and something that looked dangerously close to despair. Fine. The word came out bitter. But only because I can't carry both of them and the bag by myself. She turned and started walking without waiting for his response, her gait unsteady as she pulled the first carrier along. Victor followed, the second carrier feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. Not because of its physical weight, he'd carried bodies heavier than this, but because of what it represented. Everything he'd tried to leave behind, everything he'd destroyed to protect, everything that was now staring him in the face with the undeniable proof of consequences he hadn't considered. They moved through the terminal in tense silence. Elena kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, her jaw set in rigid lines. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his presence beyond the bare minimum necessary to navigate toward the exit. Victor used the opportunity to study her more closely, cataloging the changes with the same attention to detail that kept him alive in his world. The weight loss was even more pronounced in profile. Her cheekbones stood out sharply, her collarbones visible above her sweater's neckline. Her jeans had been cinched tight with a belt, and he could see where new holes had been punched in the leather, evidence of progressive weight loss she couldn't afford. When had she eaten last? Really eaten, not just grabbed whatever was quick and easy between taking care of 2 infants. They reached the escalator leading down to baggage claim and ground transportation. Elena stepped on first, keeping the carrier close to her legs. Victor followed, positioning himself 1 step behind and to her right, his body automatically angling to shield her from the crowds pressing in from behind. Old habits died hard. The baby in the carrier he was holding, the one wearing pink, stirred, making a small sound that wasn't quite a cry, but wasn't contentment either. Victor looked down and got his first clear view of his daughter's face. She was perfect, impossibly small, impossibly delicate, with a dusting of dark hair that looked like it might curl when it grew longer. Her eyes were closed, tiny fists waving near her face as she made another small sound. Even in sleep, her features held an expression of serious concentration, her brow furrowed as if she was working through complex problems in her dreams. She looked like Elena. The realization hit him with unexpected force. The shape of her face, the curve of her lips, the way her nose was just slightly too small for the rest of her features. All Elena. Don't! Elena's voice was sharp, cutting through his thoughts like a blade. She'd looked back and caught him staring at the baby. Don't look at her like that. You don't get to look at her like that. Elena? You don't get to be the father who stares adoringly at his daughter, Victor. You gave up that right 9 months ago when you walked away. The escalator deposited them on the lower level. Elena stepped off and immediately started walking toward the exit, her pace faster now despite her obvious exhaustion. Victor lengthened his stride to keep up, the carrier bumping against his leg. I had reasons. I don't care. Elena, please, just listen. No. She stopped so abruptly he nearly collided with her. When she turned to face him, her eyes were blazing with the first real emotion he'd seen since she'd recognized him. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up in an airport and ask me to listen. You had 9 months to explain, 9 months to call, to text, to send a fucking letter. You chose silence. You chose divorce. You chose to walk away from our marriage without a single word of explanation beyond your lawyer's papers. I was protecting you. The words came out before he could stop them, desperate and raw. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was broken glass and bitter coffee, everything sharp and unpleasant. Protecting me? You destroyed me, Victor. You took everything we built together and you burned it to the ground. And you know what the worst part was? I didn't even know why. You just stopped coming home, stopped answering my calls, stopped existing in my life. And then I got served divorce papers like I was some business arrangement you'd decided to terminate. Her voice was rising, drawing more attention now. The security guard from upstairs had followed them down, his hand still resting on his radio. Other travelers were slowing, watching the scene unfold with the morbid fascination people reserved for public meltdowns. Victor didn't care. Let them watch. Let them call security. Nothing mattered except making Elena understand. There were threats, he said quietly, intensely. Serious threats. The Castellano family marked you as leverage after the warehouse incident. They were going to take you, Elena. take you and use you to control me, and I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't let that happen. Elena stared at him, her expression cycling through disbelief, comprehension, and finally settling on something that looked like fury. So you divorced me? You cut me out of your life completely because of threats? Did it ever occur to you to, I don't know, tell me? To give me a choice? To treat me like a partner instead of a possession you needed to store safely away? If you'd known, you would have refused to leave. You would have fought me on it. Damn right I would have. Her voice cracked. Because that's what people who love each other do, Victor. They fight together. They face threats together. They don't make unilateral decisions and then disappear. The baby in Victor's carrier, his daughter, started to cry for real now, the small whimpers escalating into full wails. The sound cut through the terminal like a siren, raw and demanding. Elena immediately turned her attention to the other carrier, bending down to unbuckle the straps with practiced efficiency. It's okay, sweetheart, she murmured, her voice transforming into something soft and soothing. Mama's here. I know you're tired, I know. She lifted the baby out, the boy, Victor realized, dressed in the blue onesie, and held him against her chest, swaying gently. The movement was so natural, so instinctive, that it was clear she'd done this thousands of times already. Your daughter needs you. Elena's voice was flat again, empty. Pick her up. She needs to be held when she cries like that. Victor looked down at the wailing infant, feeling a wave of pure panic. He'd faced down armed enemies without hesitation. He'd negotiated deals worth millions with stone-cold composure. But reaching into that carrier and picking up something so small, so fragile, so completely dependent. Now, Victor, before she works herself up into a full meltdown. His hands were shaking as he unbuckled the straps. The baby's face was red, scrunched up in distress, her tiny body rigid with unhappiness. Victor slid his hands under her, one supporting her head like he'd seen Elena do, the other under her bottom, and lifted. She was impossibly light, impossibly warm. Her cries were so loud for something so small, and he could feel her little body trembling with the force of her unhappiness. Support her head more. Tuck her against your chest. She needs to feel secure. Victor adjusted his hold, bringing the baby closer. She immediately pressed her face against his suit jacket, her cries muffling slightly against the expensive fabric. He could feel her heart beating, hummingbird fast, could feel every breath she took. His daughter. This was his daughter, and he was holding her for the first time in a busy airport terminal while his ex-wife watched with eyes that held nothing but exhaustion and disappointment. What's her name? His voice came out hoarse. Elena's jaw tightened. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, Sophia. Her name is Sophia. Sophia, Victor repeated, looking down at the baby in his arms. She'd stopped crying, her body relaxing slightly against his chest. And him? Lucas. Elena pressed a kiss to the boy's head, her eyes closing briefly. Lucas Michael. Sophia Rose. Lucas Michael and Sophia Rose. Their children had names, had existed for months without him knowing, had been born and cared for and loved while he'd been in Moscow closing deals and convincing himself the distance was necessary. Elena. He didn't know what he wanted to say, didn't know how to put into words everything churning inside him. I didn't know. If I'd known you were pregnant, you what? Would have stuck around? Would have decided I was worth the risk after all? She shook her head, bitter amusement flashing across her features. Don't make promises you wouldn't have kept, Victor. You made your choice. You decided my safety was more important than my agency, my happiness, my right to know what was happening in my own life. You decided, and I've had to live with the consequences. What consequences? Elena, what happened? Did someone threaten you? Did anyone try to... No. She cut him off with brutal efficiency. No one threatened me. No one came after me. You know why? Because your plan worked perfectly. You divorced me so publicly, so completely, that everyone in your world knew I was nothing to you anymore. Just another ex-wife who'd been discarded. Not worth bothering with. She said it like it was a victory, but Victor could hear the pain underneath. I tried to reach you, Lena continued, her voice dropping lower. When I found out I was pregnant, I called your number, disconnected. I went to your office. They said you'd moved, no forwarding address. I even tried Marco, but he looked at me like I was a stranger and said he had no information to share. You erased yourself from my life so thoroughly that I couldn't find you even when I desperately needed to. Victor felt like he'd been gutted. Marco knew? I don't know what Marco knew. He wasn't talking. None of your people were talking. I was completely cut off, completely alone, and I was pregnant with twins. Her voice was shaking now, emotion breaking through the careful control. Do you have any idea what that was like? Going through pregnancy alone? Having no one to talk to at 3 a.m. when I was terrified? Having to figure out how I was going to support 2 babies on my salary as a graphic designer? Lucas had fallen asleep against her chest, his small body relaxed and trusting. Sophia was quiet too, her breathing evening out as she pressed against Victor's jacket. I'm sorry. The words were completely inadequate, but they were all he had. Elena, I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. You thought you knew better than me what I could handle. She shifted Lucas carefully, adjusting her hold. You thought you got to make decisions about my life, about my safety, about my future, without giving me any say. That's not protection, Victor. That's control. That's treating me like a child or a possession instead of a partner. She was right. Victor knew she was right, even as everything in him wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand that the threats had been real and immediate and terrifying. But the bottom line was simple. He'd made a choice for both of them without giving her any input. He'd decided what she could know, what she could handle, what she deserved. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. I should have told you, should have trusted you to make your own choices. But you didn't. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You didn't, and now we're here, standing in an airport with 2 babies who don't know their father because you decided distance was safer than honesty. The security guard was walking toward them now, clearly deciding this conversation had gone on long enough and was disturbing other travelers. Is everything all right here, ma'am? He directed the question at Elena, his eyes flicking to Victor with professional suspicion. We're fine, Elena said, her voice firming up. Just an unexpected meeting. We're leaving now. Are you sure? Because if this gentleman is bothering you, he's not bothering me. He's my ex-husband. She said it with absolute finality, like that explained everything. Maybe it did. The guard looked between them, clearly unconvinced but not willing to push it if Elena said she was fine. All right, but I'll be watching. You need anything, you just call out. Thank you, officer. That's very kind. She waited until the guard had moved back to his position before turning back to Victor. I need to get them home. They're overdue for feeding and a nap, and I still have a 40-minute drive back to my apartment. Where are you staying? I'll drive you. Absolutely not. Elena, you can barely stand. You're exhausted. Let me at least get you home safely. I don't need your help, Victor. I've been managing just fine on my own for months. But she hadn't been managing fine. That was obvious from everything about her. The weight loss, the exhaustion, the way her hands trembled as she held Lucas. She'd been surviving, scraping by, doing everything alone because he'd cut her off so completely she'd had no other choice. Please. He hated the pleading note in his voice, but pride seemed irrelevant now. Just let me drive you home. Let me do this one thing. Elena studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion and defeat. Fine, but only because I really am too tired to drive safely right now. Your car or mine? Mine. I have a driver waiting. Of course he did. Because while Elena had been struggling alone with 2 infants, Victor had been maintaining his lifestyle of drivers and private jets and Moscow negotiations. The guilt was crushing. They made their way to the ground transportation area in silence. Victor's driver, Michael, saw them coming and immediately got out to open the rear passenger door, his expression carefully neutral despite what had to be obvious surprise at seeing Victor with a woman and 2 babies. Mr. Russo, ma'am. He took the carriers without being asked, securing them in the back seat with an efficiency that suggested this wasn't his first time handling infant car seats. Victor helped Elena into the car, his hand on her elbow as she climbed in. She didn't thank him, didn't acknowledge the gesture beyond a stiff nod. Where to? Michael asked as he slid behind the wheel. Elena rattled off an address in Queens, a neighborhood Victor knew was decent, but far from luxurious. She'd be paying at least $2,000 a month for a small two-bedroom, probably without any of the security features that would make him feel comfortable. The drive was tense and silent. Elena stared out the window, her jaw tight. Lucas and Sophia both slept, their breathing soft and even. Victor couldn't stop looking at them, cataloging every detail he'd missed. Sophia had his nose. Lucas had Elena's mouth. They were both perfect, both completely dependent on a mother who looked like she was running on fumes, and a father who hadn't even known they existed until an hour ago. "How old are they?" Victor finally asked, breaking the silence. 3 months, born November 2nd. Elena didn't look at him as she answered. 32 hours of labor. I did it alone. Well, not completely alone. My friend Rachel was there. You don't know Rachel. I met her after you left. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. She'd built an entire life without him, met new friends, given birth to their children, created a whole existence that he had no part in. I would have been there, if I'd known, but you didn't know. And whose fault is that, Victor? He had no answer for that. They pulled up in front of a 5-story brick building that had seen better days. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't exactly safe either. Victor immediately cataloged the problems. Poor lighting, no security cameras visible from the street, main entrance that didn't look like it locked properly. This is where you live? He couldn't keep the disapproval out of his voice. This is what I can afford on my salary while paying for daycare for 2 infants. Elena's tone was sharp. Not all of us have unlimited resources, Victor. I would have helped. I would have made sure you had... You would have what? Sent me money? Set me up in some apartment you controlled? That's not help, Victor. That's just another form of control. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Michael, can you help me get the carriers upstairs? 3rd floor, unfortunately, no elevator. Of course, ma'am. I'll help. Victor was already getting out of the car, not giving her a chance to refuse. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but was too exhausted to bother. Fine. Whatever. Let's just get this over with. The building's interior was worse than the exterior. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and old carpet. The stairs were steep and narrow, barely wide enough for the carriers. Victor carried both while Michael brought up the diaper bag, and Elena led the way with keys already in hand. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, corner unit. She unlocked 3 separate locks. Good, at least she understood basic security, and pushed the door open. The apartment was small but clean, decorated with the same aesthetic sense Elena had always had. Soft colors, careful arrangements, everything in its place despite the obvious chaos of caring for twins. A playmat dominated the small living room. 2 bassinets stood against one wall. The kitchen was tiny, barely big enough for one person. This was where his children lived. This cramped apartment in a building that needed serious updates, in a neighborhood that made Victor's security instincts scream. You can put them over there. Elena pointed to the bassinets. They usually sleep for another hour or so after a car ride. Victor and Michael carefully transferred the sleeping babies. Sophia stirred slightly when Victor laid her down but didn't wake. He found himself staring at her again, drinking in details he'd never thought he'd have the chance to learn. Thank you, Michael, Elena said quietly. I appreciate your help. My pleasure, ma'am. Michael nodded respectfully and let himself out, which left Victor and Elena alone in the tiny apartment with 2 sleeping babies between them. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. You should go, Elena finally said. She wasn't looking at him, her attention focused on straightening things that didn't need straightening. They'll be up soon, and I need to prepare bottles. Elena, we need to talk, really talk. About what? You've said your piece. You had threats. You divorced me to protect me. You're very sorry. I heard you. Message received. That's not... What more is there to say, Victor? She finally turned to face him, and the devastation in her eyes nearly broke him. You made your choice. You decided to handle your problems alone, to shut me out completely. You can't just walk back into my life now and expect everything to be forgiven because you had good intentions. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to explain everything, the whole story, not just pieces in an airport. I don't want to hear the whole story. Her voice was trembling. I don't want to know all the details of how you decided my life was worth less than my safety. I don't want to relive the worst months of my existence while you explain why it was all necessary. They're my children, too. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Elena's expression hardened. You're right. Biologically, they're yours. But fatherhood is more than biology, Victor. It's showing up. It's being there at 3 in the morning when they're screaming and you haven't slept in days. It's changing diapers and heating bottles and worrying about whether you're doing everything wrong. It's the day-to-day reality of raising children, and you've missed all of it. Because I didn't know. Because you made sure you wouldn't know. You cut yourself off so completely that I couldn't reach you even when I tried. Her voice broke. I tried, Victor. I tried so hard to find you, to tell you. But you'd vanished like you'd never existed. Lucas stirred in his bassinet, making a small sound of distress. Elena immediately moved to him, picking him up with practiced ease and settling him against her shoulder. He quieted instantly, recognizing his mother's touch. I want to be involved, Victor said quietly. I want to know them. I want to be their father. Why? Because you saw them in an airport and suddenly your conscience woke up? Elena's laugh was bitter. Parenthood isn't something you do when it's convenient, Victor. It's every day, every night, every moment. It's sacrificing everything for these tiny humans who need you completely. Are you ready for that? Really ready? Yes. I don't believe you. The words were simple, devastating, and completely fair. Why should she believe him? He'd proven himself unreliable, proven that he prioritized his own decisions over her input, proven that he was willing to walk away when things got complicated. Then let me prove it. Victor took a step closer, careful not to invade her space. Let me show you that I mean it. I'm not asking to move in, not asking to take over. I'm asking for time. Time to get to know them. Time to show you I can be the father they deserve. And when the next threat comes? When your world gets dangerous again? What then, Victor? Do you disappear again? Do Lucas and Sophia grow up wondering why their father keeps leaving? It was a fair question, one he didn't have a good answer for. The threat is over. Elena froze. What? Castellano. He's dead. Killed 3 days ago in a hit ordered by the Moretti family over an unrelated dispute. The vendetta died with him. There's no more threat to you. The color drained from Elena's face. You're telling me that the reason you destroyed our marriage, the entire justification for everything you put me through, doesn't even exist anymore? I just found out yesterday. I was going to... Going to what? Were you going to find me? Were you going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep living your life pretending I didn't exist? I was coming to find you. The lie felt wrong on his tongue, but the truth was worse. He hadn't known about the pregnancy, hadn't known there was a reason to come back beyond his own selfish want for her. Without seeing her in that airport, he might have stayed away forever, convinced it was safer for everyone. Don't. Elena's voice was cold. Don't lie to me. We're past the point where lies are useful, Victor. She was right, again. I don't know what I was going to do, he admitted. I hadn't decided. Part of me thought staying away was still safer, even with Castellano gone. Part of me... He trailed off. Part of you what? Part of me couldn't stop thinking about you, about whether you were okay, about whether you'd moved on. He swallowed hard. About whether there was any chance you could ever forgive me enough to let me try again. There's nothing to try again, Victor. That marriage is over, dead and buried with the papers we signed. I know. I'm not asking to resurrect what we had. I'm asking for something new, something honest. Sophia started crying in her bassinet, her wails joining Lucas's now fussing sounds. Elena closed her eyes briefly, exhaustion written in every line of her body. I need you to leave. I need to feed them and put them down properly, and I need to do it without you here watching like this is some kind of reunion. Elena, please. The word came out broken. Please, Victor, just go. I can't do this right now. I can't process all of this while trying to take care of them. I just can't. Victor wanted to argue, wanted to push for more time, more conversation, more of anything that would keep him connected to this tiny apartment and the 3 people in it who'd managed to reshape his entire world in less than 2 hours. But Elena looked like she was about to shatter, and he'd caused enough damage. Can I come back? Tomorrow? Or whenever you're ready? I don't know. My number. He pulled out his phone. It's different from before, but I want you to have it. In case you need anything. In case they need anything. She rattled off her number with mechanical efficiency, not meeting his eyes. He sent her a text immediately. It's Victor. Call if you need anything, please. Okay. Elena's voice was distant, already pulling away from him emotionally, even though they were standing 3 feet apart. Okay. I have your number. Now please go. There was nothing left to do but leave. Victor took one last look at Sophia and Lucas, his children, 3 months old and completely unaware that their world had just become infinitely more complicated, and walked to the door. Elena. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've given you every reason not to trust me, but I'm asking anyway. Please, let me try. She didn't respond, didn't even look at him, just stood there with Lucas against her shoulder and exhaustion carved into every line of her body, while Sophia cried and the afternoon light filtered through the cheap blinds. Victor let himself out. The hallway felt different than it had on the way up, darker, narrower, more suffocating. He took the stairs 2 at a time, suddenly desperate to be outside, to breathe air that didn't smell like old carpet and crushed dreams. Michael was waiting by the car, his expression carefully neutral. Where to, Mr. Russo? Victor opened his mouth to say home and found he couldn't. Going back to his empty penthouse, pouring that scotch, pretending this hadn't happened, it was impossible. Everything had changed. He'd changed, somewhere between seeing Elena across that terminal and holding his daughter for the first time. Drive. The word came out rough. Just drive. I need to think. Michael nodded and pulled smoothly into traffic. Victor slumped against the leather seat and closed his eyes. But all he could see was Elena's face. The exhaustion, the pain, the way she'd looked at him like he was a stranger who'd done terrible things to someone she used to love. He'd done this. All of it. The loneliness, the fear, the months of struggling alone. He'd caused all of it with his arrogant certainty that he knew what was best. His phone buzzed. For a wild, irrational moment, he thought it might be Elena. But no. It was Marco, still asking about the Moscow shipment. Victor stared at the message for a long moment. Then he opened his contacts and started scrolling. He had hundreds of numbers stored. Associates, enemies, contacts scattered across a dozen countries. People who feared him or respected him or wanted something from him. But he didn't have the one number that mattered most. He had it now, sent from Elena's phone in a moment of exhausted surrender. But having it and being allowed to use it were 2 very different things. 3 months. He'd missed 3 months of his children's lives. First smiles, first sounds, all the tiny moments that would never come again, gone. And Elena had experienced all of it alone, had navigated the terrifying landscape of new parenthood without a partner, without support, without the person who should have been beside her through all of it. The guilt was crushing, but beneath it was something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Because she hadn't slammed the door completely. She'd given him her number, she'd let him hold Sophia, she'd allowed him into her apartment, into the life she'd built without him. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even close to forgiveness, but it wasn't absolute rejection either. Victor pulled out his phone again and opened the message thread with Elena. Her number stared back at him, 10 digits that represented his only connection to his children. He typed, "Thank you for letting me meet them. I know I don't deserve it." He stared at the message for a full minute before deleting it unsent. Too much, too soon. She needed space, needed time to process. Bombarding her with messages wouldn't help anyone. Instead, he called Marco. "Finally," Marco answered. "I was starting to worry. Did the shipment—" "I need you to do something for me." Victor cut him off, his voice brooking no argument. "I need you to find out everything about Elena's current situation. Employment, finances, security of her building, everything, and I need it by tomorrow morning." There was a pause. "Boss, I thought we agreed she was off limits. You said, things have changed. I'll explain tomorrow. Just get me the information." "Understood." Marco knew better than to push when Victor used that tone. Anything specific you were looking for? Victor thought about the cramped apartment, the exhaustion carved into Elena's features, the way she'd said she could barely afford daycare on her salary. I need to know if she's safe, if she's taken care of, if there's anything she needs that she's not getting. Got it. I'll have a full report by 8 a.m. Good. Victor ended the call and went back to staring out the window. The city rolled past, familiar and foreign all at once. How many times had he driven these streets? How many deals had he closed? How many threats had he neutralized? How many decisions had he made that affected hundreds of lives? And yet he'd never felt more powerless than he did right now, knowing that the three people who mattered most in the world were living in a building with poor security and inadequate locks while he sat in the back of a luxury car with a driver who made more than most families. The disparity was obscene, but more than that, it was fixable. Money could solve a lot of problems. It could buy better housing, better security, better childcare. It could ease the burden Elena was carrying alone, if she'd let him. That was the question, wasn't it? Would she let him help? Or would she see it as another attempt at control, another way for Victor to make decisions about her life without her input? He needed to be careful, needed to approach this the right way. Not with money and solutions, but with respect and genuine offers of support that she could accept or refuse on her own terms. It went against every instinct he had. Victor was a fixer. He solved problems, eliminated obstacles, made things happen through sheer force of will and resources. That was how he'd built his empire, how he'd survived in a world where showing weakness meant death. But Elena wasn't a problem to be solved. She was a person who deserved agency, respect, and the right to make her own choices, even if Victor disagreed with them, even if those choices meant keeping him at arm's length forever. The car turned onto the bridge, Manhattan's skyline emerging from the dusk. Victor's penthouse was up there somewhere, 47th floor of a building with world-class security and a view that cost more per month than most people made in a year. Meanwhile, Elena was in Queens with 2 crying babies and no support system beyond a friend he'd never met. The contrast made him sick. Michael, change of plans. Take me to... He paused, pulling up his contacts again. Take me to FAO Schwartz. I need to buy some things. Sir, it's nearly closing time. I don't care. Get me there. Michael accelerated smoothly, weaving through traffic with the ease of someone who'd spent years navigating New York's chaos. Victor was already making a mental list. Cribs, clothes, toys, bottles, everything 2-3-month-old babies might need. Then he stopped himself. Elena would see it as control, would interpret it as Victor trying to buy his way into their lives, trying to fix things with money because he didn't know how to fix them with honesty and time. She'd be right. Belay that, Victor said quietly. Just take me home. Yes, sir. The rest of the drive passed in silence. Victor's mind churned through possibilities, scenarios, ways this could play out. Most of them ended with Elena shutting him out completely. Some ended with years of bitter custody battles. A precious few ended with something that looked like co-parenting, if not friendship. None of them ended with what he really wanted, a family, whole and healed and together. But he'd given up the right to want that when he'd signed those divorce papers, when he'd chosen protection over partnership, distance over trust. Now all he could do was try to be better. Try to be the father Lucas and Sophia deserved. Try to be someone Elena could trust, even if she could never love him again. It was a start. Maybe not a good start, but it was something. And right now, something was all he had. Victor didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse with the lights off, watching the city glitter below, while his mind replayed every moment of that airport encounter on an endless loop. The way Elena had looked at him with nothing in her eyes, the weight of Sophia in his arms, the exhaustion carved into every line of Elena's face, the cramped apartment with its inadequate locks and 2 babies who didn't know their father existed. At 3 a.m, his phone buzzed. He grabbed it with embarrassing desperation, hoping irrationally that it might be Elena. It was Marco. Report ready, sending now. Victor opened the attachment and felt his stomach drop with each line he read. Elena was drowning. She worked remotely as a freelance graphic designer, pulling in maybe $35,000 a year on a good year. Daycare for twins in New York cost more than her rent, nearly $3,000 a month for both babies. She'd burned through her savings in the first 2 months after they were born. Her credit cards were maxed out. She was 3 weeks behind on rent. The building had filed 2 complaints with the city in the past year for code violations that still hadn't been addressed. The main entrance lock had been broken for 6 weeks. There'd been 2 break-ins in the past 3 months, both on her floor. And she was doing it all alone because Victor had decided her safety was more important than her agency. He wanted to put his fist through something. Instead, he called his lawyer at 3:30 in the morning. "Victor?" Richard's voice was thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I need you to draw up papers. Child support backdated to when they were born. I want it generous, more than generous. Whatever the maximum allowable amount is, triple it." Silence on the other end. Then, "Victor, you don't have any children." "I do. Twins, 3 months old. I just found out yesterday." Jesus Christ. Richard was fully awake now. "Does the mother know you're planning to file?" "She knows they're mine, but she doesn't trust me, and she has every reason not to. I need to set this up properly, legally, so she knows I'm serious about supporting them. I also need you to look into what rights I have as a father, visitation, custody arrangements, all of it." "Slow down. First things first, have you established paternity legally?" "Not yet." "Then that's step one. You'll need DNA tests, documentation, the whole process. After that, we can talk about support and visitation. But Victor, if the mother is hostile..." "She's not hostile, she's hurt. There's a difference." Victor rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him despite the adrenaline. "And I deserve every bit of that hurt. But I need to do this right. I need to support my children properly, legally, in a way that can't be disputed or taken away on a whim." "All right. I'll start drafting documents. But you need to talk to her first. Spring this on her out of nowhere, and it'll look like you're trying to control the situation." "I know. I'll talk to her." Victor paused. "How long until you can have something ready to review?" "Give me 48 hours for a first draft. And Victor, get a paternity test done ASAP. Everything else hinges on that." The call ended, and Victor was left alone again with the city lights and his churning thoughts. He should wait. Should give Elena time to process, time to breathe, time to decide if she even wanted him in their lives at all. But he couldn't stop seeing that apartment, couldn't stop thinking about the broken lock 3 floors down, the code violations, the rent she couldn't pay. At 5 a.m., he texted her. "I know you need space. I'm not asking to see you today. But I need you to know, I want to help. Financially, with childcare, whatever you need, no strings attached." He stared at the message for 10 minutes before deleting it unsent. Too much. Too fast. It would sound like he was trying to buy his way in. By 6 a.m., he drafted and deleted 7 different messages. At 7, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" "It's Elena." Her voice was flat, exhausted. "Lucas was up all night with colic. I haven't slept, and I keep thinking about what you said yesterday, about the threats being over." Victor sat up straighter, his heart hammering. "I'm listening. You destroyed our marriage for a threat that doesn't exist anymore. You put me through 9 months of hell, made me raise our children alone, made me believe I meant nothing to you, all for something that's over." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you understand how that feels? Knowing that everything I suffered was for nothing?" "It wasn't for nothing. At the time, the threat was real. Castellano had killed 2 people already to send messages to his enemies. He would have taken you, Elena. He would have used you, hurt you, but he didn't. Because you cut me off so completely that I became worthless to him. And now he's dead, and I'm alone with 2 babies and 3 weeks behind on rent, and you're calling from your penthouse like you have any idea what my life has been like." Victor felt like he'd been punched. "You're behind on rent? Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't do that thing where you try to fix everything with money. That's not why I called." "Then why did you call?" Silence stretched between them. Victor could hear one of the babies fussing in the background, could hear Elena's ragged breathing. "I don't know," she finally said. "I don't know why I called. Maybe because I'm so tired I can't think straight. Maybe because part of me still can't believe you're really back. Maybe because..." She stopped. "Because what?" Because they're your children too, and I don't know how to navigate that. I don't know how to co-parent with someone I don't trust, someone who walked away once and could walk away again. I won't walk away. You don't know that. You can't promise that. Your world is dangerous, Victor. It was dangerous before and it'll be dangerous again. What happens when the next threat comes? When the next Castellano decides I'm leverage, do you disappear again? Do you decide distance is safer than honesty all over again? She was right to question it. Victor had built his life in a world where violence was currency and loyalty was bought with fear. That world hadn't changed just because Castellano was dead. I'm getting out, he heard himself say. What? I'm getting out of the business, selling my operations, liquidating assets, walking away from all of it. The words came out before he'd fully formed the thought, but as soon as he said them, Victor knew they were true. I can't be the father they need while I'm running an empire built on threats and violence. I can't ask you to trust me while I'm still part of that world. Victor, you're not thinking clearly. You can't just walk away from... I can. I will. His voice was steel. I've been thinking about it for months anyway. The Moscow deal was supposed to be my last big play, one final expansion before I started transitioning out. Castellano's death just accelerated the timeline. You're serious? Completely. I'll need time to do it right. You don't just walk away from this kind of business overnight without ending up dead. But I can start the process now, 6 months, maybe a year, and I'll be completely clean. He could hear Elena breathing on the other end, could imagine her standing in that tiny apartment processing this information while the babies fussed and morning light filtered through cheap blinds. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered. Say you'll let me see them. Not today, not even this week if you're not ready. But soon. Let me meet them properly, spend time with them, start learning how to be their father. And if you change your mind about leaving the business, if you decide it's too hard or too dangerous or you can't actually walk away, then you can shut me out completely. I'll accept whatever boundaries you set. Victor's throat felt tight. But give me a chance to prove I mean this. Please. Another long silence. Victor held his breath. Call me in 3 days, Elena said finally. I need time to think, time to figure out what I even want this to look like. 3 days? I'll call. And Victor? Her voice softened slightly, losing some of its sharp edge. Don't text me 20 times a day. Don't send money I didn't ask for. Don't try to fix everything before we've even talked about what needs fixing. Can you do that? It went against every instinct he had, but yes, I can do that. Okay. She sounded utterly exhausted. 3 days. The line went dead. Victor sat in the growing dawn light and realized his hands were shaking. 3 days. She'd given him 3 days to figure out how to convince her he was serious, how to prove he could be trusted, how to show her that he understood the magnitude of what he'd done and what he was asking for. It felt like both an eternity and no time at all. His phone rang again immediately, Marco this time. Tell me you got some sleep, Marco said without preamble. No. You? A couple hours. Listen, about that report, boss, she's in trouble. Real trouble. I don't know if you saw the part about... I saw all of it. Victor's voice was grim. The rent, the broken lock, everything. So what do you want to do? I can have someone fix the building security today, can have a check delivered for the back rent, can set up a monthly deposit to cover... No. The word came out harder than Victor intended. She told me not to try to fix everything with money. She needs to trust that I respect her boundaries. Boss, with all due respect, her boundaries won't mean much if she gets evicted or if someone breaks into that apartment. The security situation there is shit. Victor closed his eyes. Marco was right. The logical, practical part of his brain that had kept him alive for 20 years was screaming at him to solve these problems immediately, to throw money and resources at the situation until Elena and the babies were safe and secure. But the part of him that wanted a real relationship with his children knew that going against Elena's explicit wishes would destroy any chance of building trust. Can you fix the building security without her knowing it came from me? Marco was quiet for a moment. Maybe. I'd have to work through the building management, make it look like they're finally addressing the violations. It'll cost extra. I don't care what it costs. Just make sure she's safe without making it obvious I'm interfering. Done. What about the rent situation? Leave it alone for now. If she gets an eviction notice, we'll address it then. But I'm not going to undermine her by fixing things she didn't ask me to fix. You're a better man than I am, Marco said. I don't know how you're sitting on your hands when you know they're struggling. I'm not a better man. I'm the man who put her in this situation in the first place. Victor's voice was rough. The least I can do is respect her enough to let her make her own choices about what help she wants to accept. After Marco hung up, Victor forced himself to shower and change clothes. He needed to maintain some semblance of normalcy, needed to pretend his entire world hadn't been upended in an airport terminal 24 hours ago. His reflection in the mirror looked like hell, dark circles, tension carved into every line of his face, eyes that held too much emotion for comfort. He looked like a man coming apart at the seams. The next 3 days were torture. Victor threw himself into work, partly to distract himself and partly because if he was serious about leaving the business, he needed to start laying groundwork now. He had calls with lawyers, accountants, his most trusted associates, started quietly putting out feelers about selling various operations, began the delicate process of extracting himself from a world where people didn't just retire. They either died or disappeared. Every few hours he'd pull out his phone and stare at Elena's number, type out messages he never sent. How are they doing? Did you get any sleep? I keep thinking about Sophia's face when she cried. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He sent none of them. He'd promised not to bombard her, and he was determined to keep that promise even if it killed him. On day 2, Marco reported that building management had been persuaded to address the security issues immediately. New locks on all entrance doors, security cameras in the hallways, a complete electrical system update to address the code violations. It was being framed as the city finally cracking down on the building's violations. Nothing to do with Victor at all. It wasn't much, but it let Victor sleep slightly better, knowing that at least Elena and the babies weren't in immediate physical danger. On day 3, at exactly 9 a.m., Victor called. Elena answered on the first ring. Hi. Hi. His throat felt tight. How are you? How are they? Exhausted, overwhelming, perfect. She paused. The building fixed a bunch of stuff yesterday. New locks, cameras, even replaced some wiring that's been sparking for months. Did you? I may have made a call to the city inspector about the code violations, Victor said carefully, but the actual repairs are from the building management. I didn't pay for them directly. He could hear her breathing on the other end, processing. That's a very fine line you're walking. I know, but you asked me not to try to fix everything with money, and I'm trying to respect that while also not watching you live in an unsafe building. It's still controlling. You're right. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. He meant it. Even if it killed him to watch her struggle, he wouldn't cross that line again without her permission. Another pause, then, you can come over tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. They usually nap from 3 to 5, so you'll have about an hour before they go down. Victor's heart slammed against his ribs. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We need to establish ground rules first. I'm listening. This is about them, not us. You're here to build a relationship with Lucas and Sophia, not to try to win me back or rehash the past. Clear? Clear. You follow my lead with them. I know their schedules, their preferences, what soothes them and what sets them off. You don't question my parenting or try to suggest better ways. You're learning from me right now, not co-parenting yet. Understood. And Victor? Her voice softened slightly. Don't expect too much from yourself. They're 3 months old. You can't make up for lost time in one afternoon. This is going to take months, maybe years, of consistent showing up before they really know you. I know. His voice was rough. But I have to start somewhere. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late. She hung up before he could respond. Victor immediately called Richard. I need that paternity test set up as soon as possible, and I need it done in a way that doesn't feel invasive or controlling to Elena. I'll have a mobile service come to your location. They can do cheek swabs on you and the babies, completely non-invasive, takes 5 minutes. Results in 72 hours. Perfect. Schedule it for tomorrow if possible. Victor paused. And Richard, draw up a proposal for child support. I want it ready to present when the paternity results come back. The rest of the day crawled by. Victor couldn't focus on anything, couldn't sit still, couldn't stop his mind from racing through 1,000 scenarios of how tomorrow could go wrong. That night, he stood in his closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear. Suits seemed too formal, jeans seemed too casual. Everything felt wrong for meeting his children properly for the first time. He finally settled on dark slacks and a simple button-down, something that looked put together without being intimidating. Sleep was impossible. He lay in bed watching the ceiling and thinking about Sophia's face when she'd cried, about Lucas sleeping peacefully against Elena's chest, about all the moments he'd already missed and all the ones he was desperate not to miss in the future. At 1:30 a.m., his phone buzzed. Elena, bring coffee tomorrow. Good coffee. I'm running on fumes and the bodega stuff tastes like dirt. Victor stared at the message, something warm unfurling in his chest. It was such a small thing, such a simple request, but it felt like a peace offering, or at least an acknowledgement that they were in this together, even if everything between them was complicated and broken. He texted back. What kind? The response came immediately. Anything with caffeine and no judgment about how much sugar I put in it. Victor smiled for the first time in 3 days. Deal. He showed up at 1:45 the next afternoon with 2 large coffees from the place in Manhattan that Elena used to love. Back when they were married, back when things were simple. Well, simpler. His life had never been exactly simple. He also brought a bag from the Italian bakery she used to drag him to on Sunday mornings, the one with the cannoli she claimed were worth the 40-minute subway ride. He was not, technically, buying his way in. He was bringing coffee and pastries. There was a difference. At least, he told himself there was. Elena opened the door before he could knock, like she'd been watching for him. She looked slightly better than she had at the airport. She'd slept, at least a little, and her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. But the exhaustion was still there, carved into the fine lines around her eyes. You remembered the bakery, she said, looking at the bag. You said it had the best cannoli in New York. Had. Past tense. We're not those people anymore, Victor. I know. He held out the coffee. But you still drink coffee, and you're still exhausted, and I still remember how you take it. She took the cup, her fingers careful not to touch his. 2 sugars and cream? 2.5 sugars. You always said 2, but you always added that extra half. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that he'd paid attention to such a small detail. She took a sip and closed her eyes briefly. God, that's good. The bodega coffee is truly terrible, but it's cheap and close. I can bring you coffee every time I visit, Victor offered. I'm not trying to fix everything with money. It's just coffee. Elena studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. They're awake and fed, so you've got good timing. The apartment looked slightly different in afternoon light. Still small, still cramped, but somehow more lived in than it had seemed during his brief visit before. There were baby clothes drying on a rack near the window, a laptop open on the tiny dining table, surrounded by what looked like design work. Evidence of Elena's life, the one she'd built without him. Lucas and Sophia were in bouncy seats on the floor, both awake and alert. Lucas was gnawing on his fist, making soft, grunting sounds. Sophia was staring intently at a black and white patterned toy hanging from her seat. Victor's heart seized. They were so small, so perfect, so completely his responsibility, even though he'd done nothing to earn the right to them. You can sit, Elena said, settling onto the couch with her coffee. They won't break if you look at them. Victor lowered himself to the floor between the bouncy seats, his movements careful. Both babies immediately turned their attention to him, or at least in his general direction. At 3 months, he knew they couldn't see perfectly yet, but they seemed aware of his presence. Hi, he said softly, feeling absurdly self-conscious. Hi, Lucas. Hi, Sophia. They can't understand you yet, Elena said, but her voice was gentler than it had been. But they respond to tone. Talk to them like they're people, not babies. They like that better than baby talk. Victor nodded, not taking his eyes off his children. Sophia had stopped staring at her toy and was now looking vaguely in his direction, her expression serious. Lucas had abandoned his fist and was making soft, cooing sounds. They look like you, Victor said. Sophia has your nose. Lucas has your chin. Elena took another sip of coffee. I spent the first month looking for pieces of you in their faces and hating myself for it. The words hit like a physical blow. Elena, I'm not saying it to hurt you. I'm just being honest. You wanted honesty, right? That's what this is. She set her coffee down. I was angry at you, furious, and I still couldn't stop looking for you in them. Couldn't stop wondering if you'd care if you knew. Couldn't stop imagining what you'd say if you saw them. What did you imagine I'd say? I don't know. Sometimes I imagined you'd be happy. Sometimes I imagined you wouldn't care at all. Sometimes I imagined you'd accuse me of trying to trap you, even though the divorce was your idea. She laughed without humor. My imagination was all over the place at 3 a.m. when they were both screaming, and I was so tired I couldn't remember if I'd eaten that day. Victor felt something crack open in his chest. I would have cared. If I'd known, I would have moved heaven and earth to be there. Would you? Or would you have decided they were safer without you too? It was a fair question, one Victor didn't have a good answer for. Sophia started fussing, her small sounds escalating toward a cry. Elena immediately moved to pick her up, but Victor reached out without thinking. Can I? Elena hesitated, then nodded. Support her head. She doesn't have full neck control yet. Victor lifted Sophia with careful hands, remembering the position from the airport. She felt even lighter than she had then, even more impossibly fragile. Her fussing quieted as he settled her against his chest, her small body warm through his shirt. Hey, sweetheart, he murmured. It's okay. I've got you. Sophia made a small sound and pressed her face against his shirt, her breathing evening out. Victor could feel her heartbeat, fast and steady, could feel each tiny breath she took. This was his daughter. He'd helped create her, and she existed in the world as a complete person, and he'd missed 3 months of her life because he'd been too proud or too scared or too convinced he knew better. She likes you, Elena said quietly. She doesn't usually settle for people she doesn't know. Maybe she recognizes something, Victor said, not quite believing it, but hoping anyway. Maybe. Elena picked up Lucas, who was starting to work himself up toward his own cry. Or maybe she's just tired and you're warm. Don't read too much into it yet. They sat in silence for a while, each holding a baby, the afternoon light slanting through the windows. It should have been awkward. They were divorced, after all, sitting in Elena's apartment like strangers playing house. But somehow it wasn't. Somehow it felt almost normal, like this was something they'd done 100 times before. I talked to my lawyer, Victor said finally, about paternity tests and child support. I want to do this legally, properly, so you know I'm committed. Elena's expression shuddered immediately. I don't want your money, Victor. It's not about what you want. It's about what they deserve. They deserve a father who supports them financially, who takes responsibility, who doesn't leave their mother struggling to make rent. How did you know about the rent? Victor cursed internally. He'd promised not to interfere, and here he was revealing that he'd been keeping tabs. Marco ran a background check, he admitted. I needed to know your situation. So you had me investigated. Her voice went cold. That's not respecting boundaries, Victor. That's invading my privacy. You're right. I'm sorry. I should have asked you directly instead of going behind your back. He met her eyes. But I'm not sorry for wanting to help with the financial burden. These are my children too, and you shouldn't have to do this alone just because I was an idiot. Elena looked down at Lucas, her expression complicated. I don't want to be another one of your obligations. I don't want you writing checks to ease your guilt. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility. And Elena, you're 3 weeks behind on rent. You're drowning financially. Let me help. I'll catch up. I always catch up. At what cost? You've lost weight, you're exhausted, you're working yourself into the ground trying to do everything alone. Victor's voice softened. There's no prize for martyring yourself. Let me be a father to them. Real co-parenting includes sharing the financial burden. Fine. The word came out sharp. Have your lawyer draw up papers. I'll review them with my lawyer before I sign anything. You have a lawyer? I will by tomorrow, because I'm not going into this blind, and I'm not trusting you to handle legal matters that affect my children without oversight. It stung, but Victor understood. Trust had to be earned back one tiny piece at a time. and she had every right to protect herself and the babies. That's fair. I'll have Richard send everything to your lawyer once you let me know who it is. Sophia had fallen asleep against Victor's chest, her breathing deep and even. He looked down at her, at the impossibly long eyelashes resting against her cheeks, at the way her tiny hand had curled around a fold of his shirt. Something fierce and protective and terrifying rose up in his chest. He would burn the world down to keep her safe, would do anything, sacrifice anything, to make sure she never knew hunger or fear or abandonment. The same feeling he'd had about Elena once, the feeling that had driven him to destroy their marriage rather than risk her safety. But he understood now that protection without partnership was just another form of control, that keeping someone safe by taking away their choices was no kindness at all. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, that I'll make the same mistakes, that I'll try to control instead of trust, that I'll hurt all of you again. Elena looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Good, she finally said. Fear might make you careful, might make you think before you act, might make you realize that being a parent isn't about grand gestures or protection. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's hard and boring and exhausting. I want to show up. I want to be here for all of it. Then prove it. Not with money or promises or dramatic declarations about leaving the business. Prove it by being here. Tomorrow, next week, next month. Prove it by being consistent, by being reliable, by being someone they can count on. Usha, Victor met her eyes. I will, I promise. Don't promise, just do it. Lucas started fussing again, his small sounds escalating toward crying. Elena stood, swaying gently as she tried to soothe him. He's hungry again. They eat every 3 hours like clockwork. She moved toward the kitchen. I need to warm bottles. Can you hold Sophia while I do that? Of course. Victor watched as Elena maneuvered around the tiny kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling bottles from the fridge and setting up the warmer. This was her life now, constant feeding schedules, warming bottles, changing diapers, stolen moments of sleep between babies demanding attention. And she'd been doing it alone for 3 months. The guilt was crushing. But underneath it was something else, determination. He couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the damage he'd done. But he could be here now, could show up day after day until Elena believed he meant it, until his children knew they had a father who wouldn't walk away. It was the least he could do. And maybe, if he was very lucky and very consistent and very careful, it would be enough. The bottle warmer beeped, and Elena tested the temperature against her wrist before handing one to Victor. Lucas had worked himself into a full cry now, his face red and scrunched with indignation. Hold Sophia with your left arm and take the bottle with your right, Elena instructed, demonstrating with Lucas. Support her head in the crook of your elbow. Angle the bottle so the nipple stays full. You don't want her getting air. Victor adjusted his hold on Sophia, his movements careful and unpracticed. The baby immediately latched onto the bottle when he offered it, her crying stopping as abruptly as it had started. Her eyes locked onto his face as she drank, serious and intent. She's staring at me, Victor said softly. She does that. Lucas is more laid back, but Sophia studies everything like she's taking notes. Elena had settled back on the couch with Lucas, who was drinking contentedly. The pediatrician says she's going to be the troublemaker, too observant for her own good. She gets that from you. Please, she gets that from you. I've seen you catalog an entire room in 30 seconds. Elena paused. Although I guess you had good reason for that, given your world. The reminder of what Victor was hung in the air between them. He watched Sophia drink, her small hands waving near the bottle, and felt the weight of everything his life had been pressing down on him. I meant what I said about getting out, he said quietly. I've already started the process, met with 3 different buyers yesterday about various operations. It'll take time to do it safely, but I'm committed. Elena didn't respond immediately. When Victor looked up, she was studying him with that same analytical expression Sophia had just been giving him. Why now? Is it really about them, or is it about easing your guilt? Both, Victor admitted. I can't undo what I did to you. Can't give you back those 9 months, or make the pregnancy easier or be there for their birth. But I can make sure the future is different. Make sure they grow up with a father who doesn't bring danger to their doorstep. And if you resent them for it, if you wake up in 5 years and realize you gave up your empire for children who don't appreciate the sacrifice, that won't happen. You don't know that. You can't predict the future, Victor. You can't guarantee you won't regret this choice. Sophia had finished half her bottle and was slowing down, her eyelids growing heavy. Victor shifted her to his shoulder, remembering how Elena had done it, and patted her back gently until she gave a small burp. I regret a lot of things, he said, looking down at his daughter's sleepy face. I regret not telling you about the threats. I regret divorcing you instead of trusting you to make your own choices. I regret missing their birth and the first 3 months of their lives. But I will never regret choosing them over the business. Never. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Lucas had finished his bottle and was already asleep against her chest, his small body completely relaxed. I want to believe you, she finally said. I want to believe this isn't just a temporary emotional response to seeing them. But Victor, you built that empire over 15 years. You were ruthless and strategic and completely committed to it. People don't just walk away from that. People walk away from things that matter when they find something that matters more. Pretty words. True words. Victor met her eyes. I was good at what I did, successful, powerful, feared, but I was also alone, empty, going through the motions of a life that stopped meaning anything the day I signed those divorce papers. So this is about me too, Elena's voice was sharp. About getting me back. No. This is about being the father they deserve. If that means you and I eventually find our way back to something, friendship, partnership, I don't know, then that's a bonus. But I'm not doing this to win you back. I'm doing it because it's right. Sophia had fallen fully asleep now, her breathing deep and even against Victor's shoulder. He could feel each small breath, could feel the weight of her trust in him, even though she had no idea who he really was. The responsibility was staggering. The paternity test people are coming tomorrow morning, Victor said. 9 a.m. if that works for you. They'll do quick cheek swabs and we'll have results in 72 hours. I don't need a paternity test to know they're yours. But I need it for the legal paperwork, for child support, visitation rights, all of it. I want everything documented properly so you never have to worry about me trying to take them or disappear with them or use my resources against you. Elena's expression softened slightly. That's actually thoughtful. Most men in your position would use the power imbalance to their advantage. I'm not most men, and I'm trying very hard not to be the man I was 9 months ago. I can see that. She stood carefully, cradling Lucas. I'm going to put him down. You can put Sophia in the other bassinet. Victor followed her to the small bedroom, which had been converted into a nursery of sorts. The bassinet stood side by side near the window, a changing table wedged into the corner. Everything was second-hand but clean, organized with the same careful attention to detail Elena had always brought to their home. Their old home. The penthouse they'd shared before Victor had destroyed everything. He laid Sophia down with infinite care, his hand lingering on her small chest to make sure she was still breathing. The protective instinct was overwhelming, completely foreign and utterly familiar all at once. You're doing fine, Elena said softly, settling Lucas into his bassinet. Better than most first-time fathers, actually. You're not panicking or looking like you're about to drop them. I'm terrified I'm going to do something wrong. Welcome to parenthood. That feeling never goes away. She adjusted Lucas's blanket, tucking it around him. You just learn to function through the terror. They stood side by side, watching the babies sleep. It should have been awkward, divorced couple playing house over children one of them hadn't known existed until days ago. But instead it felt almost peaceful, like they'd found some kind of temporary truce in the shared responsibility of 2 sleeping infants. I should go, Victor said quietly. Let you rest while they're down. Elena nodded but didn't move toward the door. Thank you for the coffee and the cannoli, even if it was slightly manipulative. It was coffee and pastries, not a bribe. The line between those things is thinner than you think. But she was almost smiling, the first genuine expression of anything close to warmth he'd seen from her since the airport. They walked back to the living room and Victor gathered his jacket, reluctant to leave, but knowing he needed to respect the boundaries Elena had set. Can I come back tomorrow, after the paternity test people leave? You want to come 2 days in a row? I want to come every day, but I'm trying to pace myself and not overwhelm you. Elena studied him. Tomorrow afternoon is fine. Same time. Bring coffee again if you want. I will. Victor paused at the door. Elena, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but are you okay? Really okay? Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally? Why do you care? Because you're the mother of my children. Because I put you through hell. Because even though I have no right to your well-being anymore, I still... He stopped, the words catching in his throat. You still what? I still care. I know I shouldn't. I know I gave up that right, but I do. Elena's expression was complicated, layers of emotion playing across her features too quickly for Victor to identify them all. I'm surviving. Some days are better than others. Having Rachel helps. She brings groceries sometimes, watches them so I can shower. But yeah, it's hard, really hard. If you ever need anything, I'll let you know. That's the best I can offer right now. It would have to be enough. Victor nodded and let himself out, the sound of the locks engaging behind him feeling both like security and separation. He made it to his car before pulling out his phone and texting Marco. I need the name of the best family lawyer in New York. Someone who handles custody and child support, but has a reputation for being fair, not cutthroat. The response came quickly. Working an angle? No. Making sure Elena has proper legal representation. I don't want her going into this with some bargain lawyer who can't stand up to Richard. You want to pay for her lawyer? Boss, that's... I know how it sounds. But she can't afford a good lawyer on her salary, and I need her to have someone competent representing her interests. Look into it discreetly. Find someone good and make sure they know to bill me but work for her. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm trying to be fair. There's a difference. Victor pocketed his phone and stared at Elena's building. The new security cameras were already installed, small black domes in the hallway ceiling. The locks on the main entrance were heavy-duty now, requiring a key card for entry. It wasn't much, but it was something. The paternity test technician showed up at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning, a cheerful woman in her 50s named Margaret, who'd apparently done thousands of these tests and treated the whole thing with professional efficiency. This won't hurt at all, she assured Elena, who was holding both babies since Victor hadn't arrived yet. Just a quick swab inside each cheek, 10 seconds per baby, and we're done. The door buzzed, and Elena handed Sophia to Margaret before going to answer it. Victor stood in the hallway with 2 coffees and another bakery bag, looking like he'd slept about as well as Elena had, which was to say, not at all. You're early, Elena said. I didn't want to miss the test. Victor held out her coffee. Same as yesterday. They reconvened in the living room where Margaret had already swabbed Lucas and was packaging the sample in a sterile container. And you must be Dad, Margaret said cheerfully. If you'll just open wide for me, we'll get your sample and then do the little princess here. Victor submitted to the cheek swab with the same stoic expression he probably used for business negotiations. Margaret swabbed Sophia next, who didn't even wake up for the procedure, then packed everything into her testing kit. Results in 72 hours sent directly to both parents and the law office you specified. Any questions? No, thank you, Elena said. Wonderful. You have beautiful babies. Congratulations. Margaret let herself out, leaving Victor and Elena alone with the coffee and the weight of what they were setting in motion. 72 hours, Victor said, then we can make everything official. Are you nervous? About the results? No, they're mine. I know they're mine. He looked at the sleeping babies, but I understand why we need the legal documentation. Elena sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted despite having just woken up. The coffee helped, but only marginally. She'd been up 4 times during the night with Lucas, who was going through a growth spurt and wanted to eat constantly. You look like you need sleep more than coffee, Victor observed. I need both. I always need both. She took a long drink. This is my life now. Permanent exhaustion punctuated by moments of absolute terror that I'm doing everything wrong. You're not doing everything wrong. They're healthy, happy, clearly well cared for. They're 3 months old. Their needs are basic: food, sleep, clean diapers, affection. Wait until they're older and I have to make real decisions about their lives. Then we'll see if I'm screwing up. Victor settled into the chair across from her, his posture careful. I want to help with those decisions. Not take over, not override you, but be part of the conversation. I know you do. And I'm trying to figure out how to let you in without... She stopped. Without what? Without losing myself again. Elena met his eyes. When we were married, I let you make so many decisions. Where we lived, how we spent our time, who we socialized with. It was easier to go along than to fight you on every little thing. And then when you left, I realized I disappeared into your life so completely that I didn't even know who I was without you. The words hit Victor like a physical blow. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't either until you were gone. And then I had to rebuild myself from scratch while pregnant with twins and working freelance and terrified about the future. It was awful, but it was also liberating. I don't know. I got to figure out who I was when I wasn't trying to fit into your world. I never wanted you to disappear into my life. But I did. And I can't let that happen again, even for them. They need a mother who's whole, who knows herself, who can stand up for what they need. Not someone who defers to their father on everything because it's easier than having opinions. Victor was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. I understand, and you're right to protect that. But Elena, how do we co-parent if you can't trust me not to steamroll you? I don't know. That's what we need to figure out. She set down her coffee. Maybe we need actual rules, boundaries we both agree to, and consequences if either of us crosses them. I'm listening. Elena stood and moved to her laptop, pulling up a blank document. Okay. Rule 1. Major decisions about their health, education, or welfare require both parents to agree. Neither of us gets to make unilateral choices. Agreed. Victor watched as she typed it out. Rule 2. We communicate directly and honestly. No going behind each other's backs, no having other people run interference, no keeping secrets that affect the children. Agreed. Rule 3. We respect each other's parenting choices even when we disagree. If I say no screen time before age 2, you don't undermine that by letting them watch videos at your place. That's fair. Elena kept typing, the words flowing now. Rule 4. Financial support is handled legally and transparently. No surprise gifts, no trying to buy their affection, no using money as a weapon or a band-aid. Can I suggest an addendum to that one? Go ahead. If you need money for something specific, medical bills, childcare, whatever, you tell me directly instead of struggling in silence. And I provide it without strings or judgment. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but I still want everything documented legally so it's clear this is parental responsibility, not charity. Absolutely. They spent the next hour hammering out details, creating a framework that felt both formal and necessary. Visitation schedules, communication protocols, how to handle disagreements, what to do if one parent wanted to relocate. It was clinical and slightly depressing, reducing their relationship to a series of negotiated terms. But it was also necessary. They weren't a couple anymore. They were two people trying to raise children together while navigating the wreckage of everything they destroyed. I think that's everything, Elena said finally, reviewing the document they'd created. We can adjust as needed, but this gives us a starting point. Send it to me. I'll have Richard review it and incorporate it into the legal agreements. Lucas woke with a cry, and Elena immediately moved to pick him up, swaying gently as she soothed him. Victor watched the practiced motion, the way she seemed to know instinctively what he needed. Can I ask you something? Victor said. Depends on the question. Do you hate me? Elena looked at him for a long moment, her expression impossible to read. Lucas had quieted against her shoulder, making soft, cooing sounds. No, she finally said. I did, for a while. When you first left, I hated you so much I could barely breathe through it. But hate takes energy, and I needed all my energy for survival. So it faded into something else. Hurt, maybe. Disappointment. Anger that comes and goes. She paused. But not hate. I can work with everything else. Hate would be... He didn't finish. Would be what? Would be less than I deserve, but more than I could stand. Sophia started fussing and Victor stood automatically, moving to her bassinet. He picked her up with more confidence than he'd had the day before, settling her against his chest the way he'd learned. "Hi, beautiful girl," he murmured. "You're okay? I've got you." Elena watched him with Sophia, something complicated passing across her face. "You're getting better at that." "I'm trying. I know I'll never make up for missing the first 3 months, but I can be here for everything going forward." "Can you, though? Really?" Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "Because I need to know, Victor. I need to know if you're going to be consistent or if you're going to disappear the next time your world gets complicated." "I'm not going to disappear." "You can't promise that. Not really. Your business is dangerous. Even if you're getting out, that takes time. What happens if someone decides to retaliate for deals you've made? What happens if a rival sees you as vulnerable because of us?" Victor looked down at Sophia, at her serious little face and her dark eyes that were so like Elena's. The protective instinct that rose in his chest was almost painful in its intensity. "Then I handle it differently than I did with Castellano. I bring you into the conversation. I give you all the information and let you make informed choices about your own safety. I don't unilaterally decide what's best for you. And if I make a choice you don't agree with, if I decide I'm willing to take the risk instead of hiding, then we disagree and we work through it, together, like partners should." Elena's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "That's all I ever wanted, to be treated like a partner instead of a possession to be protected." "I know, and I'm sorry it took losing you to understand that." They fed the babies again, changed diapers, went through the routine that Elena had down to a science, and Victor was still fumbling through. It was domestic and ordinary and completely surreal. Victor Russo, feared crime boss, learning to fold a onesie properly while his ex-wife coached him through it. "You're creasing the shoulders wrong," Elena said, demonstrating. "Fold them in first, then roll from the bottom. Otherwise it takes up too much drawer space." I never would have thought about drawer space optimization for baby clothes. Welcome to parenthood. You think about everything differently when you're trying to fit 2 humans' worth of stuff into a 1-bedroom apartment. Victor's jaw tightened. The apartment situation still bothered him. Too small, too insecure despite the improvements, too much evidence of Elena struggling financially. But he'd promised not to try to fix everything with money, promised to respect her boundaries. "When the child support is formalized, you could afford a bigger place," he said carefully. "Somewhere with an actual nursery, maybe a second bathroom. Maybe. Or maybe I stay here because it's close to Rachel and I've built a life in this neighborhood." "In a building that had broken locks for 6 weeks, which are fixed now thanks to your mysterious city inspector call." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You really think I bought that explanation?" "I hoped you would." "I'm not stupid, Victor. I know you had something to do with the building suddenly addressing all the code violations, but I'm choosing to let it go because at least you tried to do it without being obvious about controlling things." "I wasn't trying to control. I was trying to keep you safe." "And there's the problem in one sentence. You still don't see the difference." Elena sighed. "Safety I didn't ask for is still control, even if your intentions are good. If you were worried about the building, you should have talked to me about it, not gone behind my back and then constructed an elaborate story about city inspectors." She was right. Again. Victor seemed to be collecting instances of being wrong lately, stacking them up like evidence of everything he needed to change. "You're right. I should have talked to you first. I will next time." "Will you? Or will you decide it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission and do whatever you think is best?" "I'll talk to you first," Victor said firmly. "Even if it's hard, even if I think I know the right answer. I'll talk to you first." Elena studied him, searching for something in his expression. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded. "Okay, I'm going to hold you to that." Sophia had fallen asleep against Victor's chest, her small body completely relaxed and trusting. He looked down at her and felt that fierce protective instinct surge again, tempered now with the understanding that protection without partnership was just another cage. "I'm scared I'm going to mess this up," he admitted quietly. "That I'm going to fall back into old patterns and hurt all of you again." "You probably will mess up," Elena said. "Everyone does. The question is what you do when you realize you've crossed a line. Do you double down and insist you were right? Or do you apologize, adjust, and do better next time? The second one. Then that's what matters. Not perfection. None of us get to be perfect. Just the willingness to keep trying, keep adjusting, keep showing up even when it's hard. Lucas had dozed off too, both babies sleeping peacefully in their arms. The apartment was quiet except for the soft sounds of their breathing and the distant noise of traffic outside. "Can I ask you something else?" Victor said. "You're full of questions today." "Do you think you'll ever trust me again? Really trust me? Not just tolerate me for their sake?" Elena was quiet for so long, Victor thought she might not answer. Then, "I don't know. Trust isn't something you can rush or force. It's built slowly through consistency and honesty and follow-through. You'd have to prove yourself over months, maybe years, before I could truly trust you again. I'll do it, however long it takes. Don't make promises about the future, Victor. Just show up today, then tomorrow, then the day after that. Let the consistency speak for itself." They put the babies down for their nap, and Victor prepared to leave, gathering his jacket and the empty coffee cups. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Actually, I have a pediatrician appointment tomorrow at 2. You could come if you want. They're getting their vaccines." Victor's heart jumped. "You want me there? They're your children too. You should be at medical appointments." Elena's voice was carefully neutral. Plus, they scream bloody murder during shots, and it's always helpful to have an extra set of hands. "I'll be there. Text me the address. Bring coffee to the appointment. I'll need it." Victor smiled despite everything. "Deal." He left the apartment and made it to the elevator before pulling out his phone to text Marco. "I need the name of that family lawyer for Elena by end of day. Also, start the process of selling the waterfront properties. I want to be completely out of that business within 6 months." Marco's response was immediate. "You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Your father would have disowned you. My father died alone and hated by everyone who knew him. I'm choosing a different path." Victor pocketed his phone and stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, feeling both terrified and strangely hopeful. He had 72 hours until the paternity results came back and everything became legally official. 72 hours to prove to Elena that he was serious, that he could show up consistently, that he could be the father Lucas and Sophia deserved. It felt like both forever and no time at all, but he'd start with tomorrow. With showing up to the pediatrician appointment, with holding babies while they got shots and probably screamed, with being present for one more ordinary moment in their extraordinary little lives. It was a start. Not a good start, maybe, but something. And right now, something was enough. The next afternoon, Victor stood in the pediatrician's waiting room holding Sophia while Elena checked them in. Lucas was in his carrier, already fussing because he somehow knew something unpleasant was coming. The waiting room was full of parents with small children, the air thick with the sounds of crying babies and toddlers playing with the communal toys. Victor felt completely out of place in his expensive suit, surrounded by mothers in yoga pants and fathers in casual clothes who looked far more comfortable with the chaos. "First time?" a woman next to him asked, bouncing a chubby toddler on her knee. "What?" "First pediatrician visit. You look terrified." "Is it that obvious?" "You're holding her like she's made of glass and you might shatter her. So yeah, pretty obvious." The woman smiled. "It gets easier." "Well, no, it doesn't, but you get better at faking it." Elena returned with paperwork and rescued Victor from the conversation. "They'll call us in about 10 minutes. You okay?" "Fine. Just out of my element." "You run an empire, but a pediatrician's office scares you?" "Different skill sets." They were called back, and the nurse, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, weighed and measured both babies, recording their stats with cheerful efficiency. "They're both right on track," she announced. "Good weight gain, excellent length. Mom, you're doing a great job." Elena smiled tiredly. "Thank you. Some days it doesn't feel like it. Those are the days you're doing the best work. The hard days are the ones that count." Patricia turned to Victor. "And Dad, are you involved in their care?" Elena started. "I'm their father," Victor said firmly. "I haven't been as involved as I should be, but I'm working on changing that." Patricia's expression said she'd heard that before, but she just smiled. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters. Dr. Chen came in moments later, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who moved with brisk efficiency. She examined Lucas first, checking his reflexes and muscle tone while he squirmed and complained. "He's perfect," she pronounced. "Hit all his developmental milestones. Good muscle control, tracking objects with his eyes, responding to sounds. You're doing excellent work." She repeated the examination with Sophia, who was less compliant and more vocal about her displeasure at being poked and prodded. "She's strong-willed," Dr. Chen observed. "That's going to serve her well later, even if it makes infancy a bit more challenging." "Story of my life," Elena muttered. Then came the shots. Victor had seen men tortured and killed, had witnessed violence that would haunt most people's nightmares, but nothing prepared him for the sound of his daughter screaming as the nurse administered the first vaccine. Sophia's face turned bright red, her mouth opened in a wail of absolute betrayal, and Victor felt his heart physically crack in his chest. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured, holding her against his chest after the nurse finished. "I know it hurts. I'm so sorry. I'm here." Lucas was equally unimpressed with his shots, his cries joining Sophia's in a chorus of infant outrage. Elena held him while he screamed, her expression a mixture of sympathy and practiced endurance. "They'll calm down in a few minutes," Patricia assured them. "Sometimes a bottle helps." They fed the babies in the examination room, both of them gradually quieting as they drank. Sophia's cries had subsided to occasional hiccuping sobs, her small body still trembling against Victor's chest. "I hate this part," Elena said quietly, "knowing I have to bring them back in 2 months for more shots." "We'll do it together next time," Victor said. "Share the burden." Elena looked at him, something shifting in her expression. "Yeah, okay, together." They made it back to the apartment and spent the rest of the afternoon soothing fussy, uncomfortable babies. Victor learned that Sophia preferred to be walked around the apartment, while Lucas just wanted to be held still. Learned that they both ran slightly warm after vaccines and that Elena kept infant acetaminophen on hand just in case. Learned 1,000 small details about caring for his children that he would have missed if he hadn't shown up. "You should go," Elena said around 6 p.m. "They'll be fussy all evening, and I know you have work. I cleared my schedule." "Victor, I want to stay. If you'll let me. I want to help." Elena looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes even darker than usual. The babies had been crying on and off for hours, taking turns so that just when one quieted, the other would start up again. "Fine," she said finally, "but don't expect this to become a regular thing. I'm not ready for you to be here every evening." "I know, but tonight, let me help." They ordered Thai food because Elena was too tired to cook and Victor didn't want to leave to pick anything up. Ate it in shifts while taking turns with the babies. Watched the sun set through the apartment windows while Sophia finally fell asleep in Victor's arms. It was ordinary, domestic, nothing like the life Victor had been living for the past 15 years. It was the best evening he'd had in 9 months. "Thank you," Elena said quietly, when both babies were finally asleep in their bassinets, "for staying, for helping, for showing up." That's what fathers do. Not all fathers, not even most fathers, honestly. She looked at him. "You're trying. I can see that you're really trying." "I am. I know I have years of mistakes to make up for, but I'm trying." Elena nodded slowly. "Okay, I believe you. Not completely. Not yet, but enough to keep doing this. Keep letting you show up." It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even close to trust. But it was something, and Victor would take it. He left the apartment that night feeling like maybe, just maybe, he could do this. Could be the father his children deserved. Could earn back even a fraction of what he'd destroyed. It was a start, and right now, a start was everything. The paternity results came back 3 days later, exactly as promised. Victor was in a meeting with potential buyers for his East Coast distribution network when his phone buzzed with the email notification. He excused himself mid-sentence, ignoring the confused looks from the men around the conference table, and stepped into the hallway to read. The results were definitive. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Lucas Michael Hayes and Sophia Rose Hayes were his children, legally and irrevocably. Victor leaned against the wall and closed his eyes, letting the reality of it wash over him. He'd known, of course. Had known from the moment he saw them in the airport, but seeing it documented, official, undeniable, it made everything real in a way nothing else had. He was a father. He texted Elena immediately. Results are in. They're officially mine. I'm having Richard draw up the support agreement this afternoon. Her response came quickly. I know. I got the same email. My lawyer will review whatever Richard sends over. Victor stared at the text. You hired a lawyer? Yes, you didn't think I'd go into legal negotiations without representation, did you? No, who did you hire? Catherine Morrison. She came highly recommended. Victor felt his stomach drop. Catherine Morrison was one of the best family law attorneys in New York, known for being absolutely ruthless in protecting her clients' interests. She was also expensive, easily $500 an hour, probably more. Elena couldn't afford Catherine Morrison. He called Marco immediately. Did you arrange for Elena to hire Catherine Morrison? You told me to find her the best lawyer and make sure they billed you. Catherine Morrison is the best. She knows to send all invoices to our office. Did you tell Elena that I'm paying for it? Silence on the other end, then. Was I not supposed to? She's going to kill me. She specifically said she wanted her own representation, not someone I was paying for. Boss, she can't afford Catherine on her own. You know that. I thought you were trying to make sure she had good legal protection. I was. I am, but she's going to see this as me trying to control the situation. Victor rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. Call Catherine. Tell her to be completely honest with Elena about who's paying her fees and make it clear that Elena is the client. Catherine works for her, not for me, regardless of who signs the checks. Got it. Anything else? Yeah. How's the Moscow situation looking? Volkov is pissed about you backing out of the expansion. Says you made commitments. I made commitments before I knew I had children. Circumstances changed. He'll understand or he won't, but I'm not changing my mind. He's threatening to make things difficult. Victor's voice went cold. Then you remind him that I still have copies of every transaction we've ever done together, and if things get difficult for me, they get impossible for him. I'm walking away clean, Marco. I'm not looking for trouble, but I won't be threatened either. Understood. I'll handle it. Victor ended the call and returned to the conference room, where the potential buyers were waiting with varying degrees of impatience. He sat down and resumed the negotiation with the same focused intensity that had built his empire. But his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Elena's face when she found out he was paying for her lawyer, about whether she'd see it as support or manipulation, about how many times he could cross the line between helping and controlling before she shut him out completely. The meeting ran until after 7 p.m., by which point Victor had successfully sold off another piece of his operation for slightly less than it was worth because he'd been distracted and the buyers had sensed weakness. He didn't care. The money was irrelevant. What mattered was dismantling his empire piece by piece, removing himself from a world that had no place for children and family and ordinary domestic evenings. His phone rang as he was leaving the office. Elena. You paid for my lawyer, she said without preamble. Her voice was tight with anger. I wanted you to have the best representation possible. That wasn't your decision to make. I specifically said I was hiring my own lawyer, and you went behind my back and arranged everything anyway. You couldn't afford Catherine Morrison on your own. You know that. I know that. I was trying to make sure you had someone competent who could stand up to Richard. By controlling who I hired and how I paid for it? By making sure my own lawyer was beholden to you financially? Elena's voice cracked. Do you not see how that's exactly the kind of thing I told you not to do? Victor stopped walking, standing in the middle of the empty parking garage. You're right. You're absolutely right. I overstepped. Damn right you did. I'll call Catherine right now and tell her to bill you directly. I'll cover whatever you've already incurred, but going forward, I can't afford Catherine Morrison, Victor. That's the whole point. You put me in a position where I either accept your financial control or I hire someone cheaper who can't adequately represent my interests. She was right. Again. Victor seemed to be building a collection of moments where Elena was absolutely, devastatingly right, and he was fumbling in the dark, trying to do the right thing and failing spectacularly. Then what do you want me to do? He asked quietly. because I genuinely don't know how to handle this. I want you to have good representation, but I don't want to control you. I want to help financially, but I don't want to overstep. I'm trying to navigate this, and I keep getting it wrong." Elena was quiet for a long moment. He could hear her breathing on the other end, could imagine her standing in that cramped apartment trying to figure out how to deal with him. "I want you to ask," she finally said. "Before you do things like this, I want you to ask me. Say, 'Elena, I'm concerned about you having adequate legal representation. Can we discuss me covering the cost of a good lawyer?' Don't just arrange everything behind my back and present it as a fait accompli." You would have said no. Maybe I would have said no, and that would have been my choice to make. But you didn't even give me that option. You just decided what was best and made it happen. Victor leaned against his car, the cold metal seeping through his suit jacket. "You're right. I should have talked to you first. I'm sorry." "You keep saying you're sorry, but you keep doing the same thing. At what point do the apologies become meaningless?" The question hit harder than any accusation. When did repeated apologies for the same behavior stop being genuine remorse and start being manipulation? When did "I'm sorry" become just another way of saying, "I'll keep doing what I want and asking forgiveness after"? "I don't know," Victor admitted, "but I'm trying to change. I know that's not enough. That trying doesn't mean much without results, but I am genuinely working on it." "Then work harder. Because I can't do this if every decision becomes a battle about whether you're going to respect my autonomy or railroad over it." "I will, I promise." "Don't promise. Just do it." Elena sighed, the sound exhausted and defeated. "Catherine called me this afternoon and explained the whole situation. She was very clear that she works for me, that anything I tell her is privileged, and that you're paying her fees as child support, not as a way to control her representation." "That's exactly what I told Marco to tell her." "I know. She believed it too, or at least she seemed to. And honestly, Victor, I do need good legal representation. I can't afford to go into this with someone who's going to get steamrolled by Richard." "So you'll keep Catherine?" "Yes, but this is the last time you arrange something like this without talking to me first. I mean it. Next time you pull something like this, I'm done. I'll hire the cheapest lawyer I can find, and you can deal with the consequences." "Understood. It won't happen again." "It better not." She paused. "Are you still coming tomorrow?" "It's Sunday. I usually take them to the park if the weather's decent." The park. A normal, domestic activity that had nothing to do with lawyers or paternity tests or legal agreements. Just parents taking their children outside. "I'd love to come." "What time?" 10 a.m. Bring coffee and maybe those croissants from the bakery. I've been craving them all week." "Done." After Elena hung up, Victor sat in his car for a long time, staring at nothing. He'd thought leaving the business would be the hard part. Thought dismantling his empire, managing dangerous men who didn't like being told the deals were off, navigating the complex process of selling operations that weren't exactly legal, that would be the challenge. But the business part was easy. Familiar. He knew how to negotiate, how to threaten, how to make men understand that walking away from Victor Russo was in their best interest. What he didn't know was how to be a partner instead of a boss, how to ask instead of decide, how to support without controlling. He was learning, but the learning curve was steep, and every mistake cost him pieces of Elena's trust that he was desperately trying to rebuild. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of November day that promised winter was coming but hadn't quite arrived yet. Victor showed up at Elena's apartment at 9:45 with coffee, croissants, and a growing sense of nervous anticipation. Elena answered the door in jeans and a thick sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired. She always looked tired, but there was something different about her today. Less guarded, maybe, or just too exhausted to maintain her walls. "You're early," she said, taking the coffee he offered. "I didn't want to be late." There's a middle ground between early and late called on time. But she was almost smiling as she said it. The babies were in their bouncy seats, both awake and alert. Sophia was studying her hands with intense concentration, occasionally bringing them close to her face and then pulling them away like she was conducting an experiment. Lucas was making soft cooing sounds at a stuffed elephant attached to his seat. They're in good moods, Elena observed. That probably means they'll be screaming messes by noon, but I'll take what I can get. Victor settled on the floor between them, feeling more comfortable in this position than he had a week ago. Sophia immediately turned her attention to him, her serious little face tracking his movements. "Hi, beautiful girl," he murmured. "You ready to go to the park?" "She can't answer you," Elena said, but her tone was gentle. "Although I appreciate that you talk to them like people. Some parents do that baby talk thing that makes me want to scream. My father never talked down to me. It was one of the few things he got right." Victor paused. "I don't want to be anything like him, but I figure if I take the few good things and discard all the terrible ones, maybe I'll end up somewhere decent." Elena sat on the couch with her coffee, watching him. "You never talked much about your father." There wasn't much good to say. He was a brutal man who built an empire on fear and died alone because everyone who'd ever known him was either too scared or too relieved to attend his funeral. "Is that what you were becoming, before all this?" Victor looked up at her, saw genuine curiosity rather than judgment in her expression. "Maybe. Probably. I'd convinced myself I was different, that I ran things more intelligently, more strategically. But at the end of the day, I was still building the same kind of empire. Still using fear as currency, still prioritizing power over everything else. And now? Now I'm trying to be someone my children won't be ashamed to know, someone who builds things instead of destroying them, someone who—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Someone who what?" "Someone who deserves you, all of you, even though I know I probably never will." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "That's not your decision to make. Whether you deserve us or not, that's something we all get to decide individually." "And have you decided?" "I've decided you get the chance to try. That's all I can offer right now." It was more than Victor had any right to expect. He nodded, not trusting his voice. They bundled the babies into their stroller, a double-wide contraption that barely fit through Elena's apartment door, and headed to the park. It was only 3 blocks away, a small neighborhood green space with playground equipment and a walking path around the perimeter. The park was busy with Sunday morning families. Children ran shrieking across the playground while parents watched from benches, coffee cups in hand. Dogs chased tennis balls. Joggers navigated around strollers and toddlers with practiced ease. Victor had never felt more out of place. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," Elena observed, maneuvering the stroller onto the walking path. "I don't know how to do this. The normal family thing. Nobody does. We're all just faking it and hoping our kids don't end up too traumatized." She paused. "Although I guess you've got a head start on the traumatizing part, given your world. Former world. I'm selling off the last of the distribution networks this week." Elena stopped walking, turning to look at him fully. "You're really doing it. Getting out completely." "I told you I was." "I know, but I wasn't sure you'd actually follow through. Most people don't. They say they'll change and then they find reasons why now isn't the right time or the circumstances are different or whatever. I'm not most people." "No, you're really not." Elena started walking again. "How's it going? The getting out part?" "It's complicated, dangerous sometimes. A lot of people aren't happy about me backing out of deals, but I'm handling it." "Are we in danger because of you leaving?" Victor had been dreading this question, had known it was coming but hoped to avoid it a little longer. "No. I've been very careful to make sure you and the babies are completely separate from my business dealings. As far as anyone in that world knows, you're my ex-wife, who I divorced months ago. They have no reason to connect you to any of my current decisions. But if they did know, if someone found out about Lucas and Sophia, then I'd handle it. But Elena, I need you to trust me when I say I've been extremely careful. Marco is the only person in my organization who knows about them, and he's loyal. Everyone else thinks I'm getting out because I'm tired or looking to retire. Nothing to do with family." Elena didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. "Okay, but if that changes, if there's even a possibility that we might be at risk, you tell me immediately. You don't make decisions about our safety without involving me." "I will. I promise." They walked in silence for a while, the stroller wheels crunching over fallen leaves. Sophia had fallen asleep already, lulled by the movement. Lucas was still awake, his eyes tracking the movement of tree branches overhead. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Of course." "When you divorced me, when you decided distance was safer, did you ever think about just telling me the truth? About sitting me down and explaining everything and trusting me to make my own choice?" Victor had asked himself this question 100 times over the past 9 months, had replayed that decision over and over, looking for the moment where he could have chosen differently. "I thought about it," he admitted, "for about 10 seconds before I convinced myself it was too dangerous. That if you knew, you'd insist on staying. You'd try to fight it with me instead of accepting protection." "You're damn right I would have." "I know, and that terrified me. The idea of you being in danger because you loved me enough to stay. I couldn't handle it, couldn't risk it, so I took the choice away from you. And destroyed both of us in the process." "Yes," Victor's voice was rough. "I destroyed both of us, and I'm sorrier for that than I know how to express." Elena was quiet for several steps, then, "I forgave you, you know, or at least I'm trying to. It's hard because I'm still angry and hurt and I don't trust you yet, but I'm trying to forgive you because holding on to all that anger is exhausting and I need my energy for them." The words settled into Victor's chest like stones, heavy and solid and precious. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. For them. Because they deserve parents who can work together without all this poison between us." They completed 2 circuits of the park before Lucas started fussing, his small sounds escalating toward a full cry. Elena checked her watch and sighed. "Feeding time. We should head back." The walk back to the apartment was quicker, both of them moving with the efficient purpose of parents who knew their children were about to lose it completely if they didn't get food soon. Elena's phone rang just as they were entering the building. She glanced at it and frowned. "It's my landlord. That's never good." She answered. "Hello? Yes, this is Elena. Wait, what? When did... No, I paid that. I have the receipt. Her face went pale. "That's not possible. I submitted it through the portal like always. Are you sure?" Victor watched her face cycle through disbelief, anger, and something that looked like panic. "Can you give me 24 hours to sort this out? Please, yes, I understand the policy, but I've never been late before. This has to be some kind of error. Just give me 1 day to..." She closed her eyes. "Fine. Yes, I understand. 24 hours. She ended the call and stood very still in the hallway, her hand still gripping the phone. "What happened?" Victor asked quietly. "Apparently my rent payment from last month didn't go through. The landlord says I'm 60 days behind now, and if I don't pay both months plus late fees by tomorrow, they're starting eviction proceedings." "But you said you paid it." "I did. I submitted it through the online portal like I always do. I have the confirmation email and everything." She pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically. "It says it was processed. It says... Oh no." "What?" "The bank rejected it. Insufficient funds." Elena's voice was hollow. "I must have miscalculated my account balance. With the daycare fees and the doctor visits and everything else, I didn't realize I was cutting it that close." Victor's hands clenched into fists. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Elena drowning financially while trying to maintain her independence, too proud to ask for help until it was almost too late. "I can transfer you the money right now. Both months plus late fees, whatever you need." "No." The word was automatic, defensive. "I'll figure it out. I can pull from my emergency fund, or maybe get an advance from one of my clients, or..." "Elena," Victor kept his voice gentle despite the urgency screaming through him. "You're about to be evicted. This isn't the time for pride." "It's not pride, it's..." She stopped, her breath coming fast and shallow. "If I take money from you, if I let you fix this, then what? Then you're paying my rent and my lawyer and probably my groceries soon. Then I'm completely dependent on you and I've lost every bit of independence I've built. Or you accept help when you need it, and we figure out a sustainable solution that doesn't involve you getting evicted with 2 infants. Elena looked like she was about to cry or scream or both. Lucas's fussing had escalated to full crying now, joined by Sophia, who'd woken up and decided she was also unhappy. "I don't know what to do," Elena whispered. I don't know how to accept help without losing myself again. Victor wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and promise everything would be okay, but he kept his hands to himself, respecting the distance she still needed. Let me transfer the rent money. Not as me controlling your life, but as child support. Early child support before the legal paperwork is finalized. It's money I owe you anyway for taking care of our children. Let me pay it now instead of waiting for lawyers to process everything. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That's a very thin justification. Maybe. But it's true. That money is yours by right. I'm just expediting the process. She stood there in the hallway with 2 crying babies and a phone full of bad news, looking more defeated than Victor had ever seen her. Fine, she finally said. Transfer the money. But Victor, we need to figure out a real solution here. I can't keep having financial crises every month while we wait for the legal system to process paperwork. Agreed. Let me talk to Richard tomorrow about expediting everything, and Elena. He waited until she met his eyes. Thank you for letting me help. I know it's hard for you. You have no idea. They made it upstairs and Elena fed the babies while Victor transferred money from his account to hers. 2 months' rent plus late fees, and then some extra because he couldn't stand the thought of her checking her account balance and panicking about having enough for groceries. His phone immediately buzzed with a text from Elena. That's more than I asked for. Emergency fund. For next time something unexpected comes up. Victor, it's done. Consider it an advance on child support. We'll settle exact amounts when the legal agreement is finalized. She didn't respond, but she didn't send the money back either. That evening, after the babies were fed and changed and finally sleeping, Elena made them both tea and sat across from Victor at her tiny dining table. We need to talk about money, she said without preamble. Real talk, not dancing around it or me pretending I don't need help. I'm listening. I make about $35,000 a year as a freelancer, maybe $40,000 if I pick up extra projects. Daycare for 2 babies is $3,000 a month. Rent is $2,000. That's $60,000 a year for just those 2 things, which is already more than I make. Victor felt sick. He'd known she was struggling, but seeing the numbers laid out so starkly made it impossible to ignore how badly he'd failed her. I've been bleeding through my savings since they were born, Elena continued. Using credit cards for groceries and utilities, juggling which bills get paid first. I'm 3 months from complete financial collapse, and that's with me working every spare moment I have. Elena, let me finish. I hate this. I hate admitting that I can't do it alone, that I need help, that my independence was apparently built on a foundation that couldn't support 2 babies. But hating it doesn't change reality. I need financial help, and you're offering it, and I need to figure out how to accept it without losing myself in the process. Victor reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. What if we frame it differently? Not as you needing my help, but as me fulfilling my responsibility as their father. Child support isn't charity. It's not you being weak or dependent, it's me paying my share of the cost of raising our children. That's what Catherine said too. Catherine is a smart woman. She also said I should ask for more than you're probably planning to offer. Said men like you tend to lowball their obligations unless pushed. Victor almost smiled. Catherine doesn't know me very well yet. I was planning to offer significantly more than standard calculations would require. How much more? Enough that you never have to check your bank balance and panic. Enough that you can afford decent housing, quality childcare, and still have savings for emergencies. Enough that you can focus on being their mother instead of drowning financially. Elena's expression was complicated. That sounds like a lot of money. It's a fraction of what I spend on single business dinners. It's nothing, Elena. Less than nothing compared to what you're doing for them. It doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like giving up the last piece of independence I managed to build. Then we build in protections. Put it in the legal agreement that the money is yours, no strings attached, that I can't reduce or withhold it arbitrarily, that it continues regardless of whether you're speaking to me or not, whether we're co-parenting well or fighting constantly. Make it bulletproof so you know I can't use it as leverage. Elena studied him across the table. You'd really agree to that? Lock yourself into payments you couldn't use as control? Yes, because this isn't about control. It's about making sure my children and their mother are taken care of. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers wrapped around her tea mug. Okay, tell Richard I want the child support agreement expedited, and I want Catherine to review every line before I sign anything. Done. I'll call him first thing tomorrow. And Victor, when the money starts coming, I'm not spending it on things I don't need. I'm not buying designer clothes or expensive furniture or anything that looks like I'm enjoying your wealth. It goes to rent, childcare, groceries, necessities, that's it. You can spend it however you want. It's your money. No, you don't understand. I need to know that I'm taking this money for them, not for me. I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know I'm not using our children as an excuse to access your wealth. Victor understood then, in a way he hadn't quite grasped before. This wasn't about pride or independence in the abstract. This was about Elena maintaining her sense of self, her integrity, her ability to believe she was making choices for the right reasons. Okay, he said gently, spend it on necessities. But Elena, childcare and rent and groceries are expensive. Don't punish yourself by refusing reasonable comforts. I'll decide what's reasonable. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while, drinking tea while the babies slept in the next room. It should have been awkward, but instead it felt almost peaceful, like they'd crossed some kind of bridge and reached slightly steadier ground on the other side. Can I ask you something? Elena said eventually. Always. Do you regret it? The life you built before, the empire, the power, all of it. Victor thought about it honestly, sorting through 15 years of choices and consequences. I regret what it cost me. I regret that I prioritized it over you, over any chance at a normal life. But the power itself, the success, no, I don't regret that. I was good at what I did. It meant something, even if what it meant was complicated and morally questionable. That's honest. You asked for honesty. I did. Elena smiled slightly. I appreciate that you didn't try to claim you regret everything or that it was all meaningless. That would have been a lie. I'm trying to stop lying. To you, to myself, to everyone. It's harder than I expected. Most worthwhile things are. Victor's phone buzzed. Marco, probably with updates on the various fires that needed putting out as Victor dismantled his empire. He ignored it. You can check that, Elena said. I know you're still dealing with business stuff. It can wait. I'm here with you and the babies. Everything else is secondary. Something shifted in Elena's expression, surprise maybe, or the beginning of trust. You really mean that? I do. I know I've given you every reason not to believe me when I say things, but I'm here, and I'm staying, and whatever Marco needs can wait until tomorrow. Elena nodded slowly. Okay, then stay. We can have dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever vegetables I have, and you can hold babies while I cook. Very domestic, very boring. Sounds perfect. And it was. Victor held Sophia while Elena cooked, talking to his daughter about nothing in particular while she stared at him with serious concentration. Lucas woke up hungry, and Victor fed him a bottle, getting better at the angle and the positioning. They ate pasta at the tiny table while the babies dozed in their bouncy seats. It was ordinary, simple, nothing like the life Victor had known for 15 years. It was the best evening he'd had in longer than he could remember. When he finally left around 9 p.m., after helping with evening bottles and diaper changes and the complex process of getting 2 babies settled for the night, Elena walked him to the door. Thank you for today, she said. For the park, for the rent money, for staying. You're showing up, Victor. Really showing up. I told you I would. I know, but a lot of people say things they don't mean. You're actually doing it. She paused. It matters. I want you to know that it matters. Victor felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen for 9 months thawing painfully back to life. Thank you for giving me the chance. Don't waste it. I won't. He meant it with everything he had. The next morning, Victor called Richard before 8 a.m. and told him to expedite every piece of the legal process. Paternity was established, child support needed to be formalized immediately, visitation schedules needed to be drafted and agreed upon. This is going to cost extra if you want it rushed, Richard warned. I don't care what it costs. Get it done. By noon, he had a draft agreement to review. The child support numbers were generous by standard calculations, but Victor immediately increased them by 50%. He wanted Elena to have breathing room, wanted her to never again stand in her hallway panicking about insufficient funds. He sent the documents to Richard with instructions to forward them to Catherine Morrison, then texted Elena, draft agreement sent to Catherine. I increased the support amounts from what Richard initially calculated. Review everything with her and let me know if you want any changes. Her response came an hour later. Catherine says these numbers are absurdly generous. Her words, not mine. Is that a problem? I don't know yet. She's reviewing the fine print to make sure there aren't any hidden strings. There aren't, but I'm glad she's checking. That evening, Victor got another text. Catherine says it's clean, no hidden clauses, no ways for you to use the money as leverage. She's recommending I accept with a few minor modifications to the visitation schedule. Whatever modifications you want are fine with me. Don't agree to things before you know what they are. That's how people get taken advantage of. Victor smiled despite himself. Elena was learning, building boundaries, protecting herself and the babies. It was exactly what she needed to be doing. Okay, tell me what modifications you want and I'll review them. The final agreement was signed 3 days later in Catherine's office. Victor and Elena sat across a conference table from each other while their lawyers reviewed every clause one final time. The child support was formalized at a level that would give Elena financial security. Visitation started at 3 times per week and would increase as the babies got older and Victor proved himself consistent. All major decisions about health, education, and welfare required both parents to agree. Everything was documented, official, legally binding. It was the death of their marriage and the birth of something new. Co-parents instead of spouses. Partners in raising children instead of partners in life. Victor signed his name and felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a mantle. These were his children, legally and irrevocably. He was bound to them and to Elena by more than just biology now. By law, by obligation, by choice. Congratulations, Catherine said when all the signatures were complete. You're officially co-parents. Elena looked exhausted and relieved in equal measure. Thank you for everything. My pleasure. And Mr. Russo, Catherine turned her sharp gaze on Victor. My client has been through hell. Whatever your intentions, whatever you think you're doing, she deserves better than more chaos and uncertainty. Don't make me regret recommending she accept this agreement. I won't, Victor said quietly. I promise. Don't promise. Just show up, consistently. That's all she needs from you. Outside the office, Elena and Victor stood on the sidewalk in the November cold. The papers were signed, the agreements formalized. Everything was official now. So, Elena said, we're really doing this. We're really doing this. You're seeing them Friday, right? According to the schedule? Friday at 2 p.m. I'll bring coffee. Always with the coffee, but she was almost smiling. Okay, Friday. She turned to walk toward the subway and Victor watched her go. This woman who'd trusted him once and was slowly, carefully learning to trust him again. This mother of his children who was stronger than she gave herself credit for. He'd destroyed everything once through arrogance and fear. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Whatever it took, however long it took, he'd prove himself worthy of the chance she was giving him. It was all he could do, and it would have to be enough. 3 months passed with the rhythm of ordinary life. Each week marked by Victor's scheduled visits and the slow, careful rebuilding of something neither he nor Elena could quite name yet. He showed up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m. with coffee and whatever Elena had mentioned craving in their brief text exchanges. He learned that Sophia hated having her diaper changed and would scream like she was being murdered. That Lucas was ticklish under his chin and would dissolve into giggles when Victor found the right spot. He learned the difference between hungry cries and tired cries and bored cries, learned how to fold tiny clothes and warm bottles to exactly the right temperature. He learned how to be a father. Elena watched him with guarded eyes at first, waiting for him to fail or disappear or revert to the controlling man who'd destroyed their marriage. But Victor showed up. Through snowstorms and business emergencies and days when he looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours, he showed up. Never late, never making excuses, never trying to change the schedule to suit his convenience. By February, something had shifted. Elena's walls were still there, but they weren't quite as high. She smiled more easily when Victor walked through the door. Let him stay past the scheduled 2 hours without watching the clock, like she was counting down to when he'd leave. Started texting him photos of the babies during the week with captions that were almost friendly. Victor was in his office on a Tuesday afternoon when his phone buzzed with a photo of Sophia gumming a teething ring, her expression one of intense concentration. Elena's text read, "She's discovered her hands exist and is furious she can't eat them." He smiled and typed back, "She gets that determination from you, please. That's pure Russo stubbornness. Maybe she got a double dose then." The door to his office opened and Marco walked in, his expression grim. "We have a problem." Victor's stomach dropped. He'd been waiting for this, knowing that leaving his world wouldn't be as clean as he'd hoped. "What kind of problem?" "Dmitry Volkov. He's in New York and he wants a meeting. Says you owe him an explanation for backing out of the Moscow expansion." "I gave him an explanation 3 months ago. Apparently it wasn't satisfactory. He's at the Carlisle Hotel, and he's not leaving until you meet with him." Marco paused. "Boss, he brought 4 of his men. This isn't a friendly catch-up." Victor closed his eyes. Dmitry Volkov was dangerous, unpredictable, and didn't take kindly to being told no. The Moscow deal had been worth millions to both of them, and Victor backing out had cost Dmitry both money and face with his own organization. "When does he want to meet?" "Tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. Victor's blood ran cold. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. was his scheduled visit with Elena and the babies. He hadn't missed a single visit in 3 months, hadn't been late once, hadn't let anything interfere with the promise he'd made to show up consistently. "Tell him I'll meet him Thursday instead." Marco stared at him. "Boss, you can't reschedule Dmitry Volkov. He doesn't work around other people's calendars. Then he can wait or he can leave. I have a prior commitment tomorrow." "A prior commitment? With who? What could possibly be more important than—" Marco stopped, understanding dawning on his face. "The babies. You have visitation tomorrow." "Yes." "Victor, this is Dmitry Volkov. He's not going to appreciate being told to wait because you have dad duty." "I don't care what he appreciates. I made a promise to be there tomorrow at 2 p.m., and I'm keeping it." Victor's voice was steel. "Tell him I'll meet Thursday morning at 10. If that doesn't work for him, he can go back to Moscow unsatisfied." Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Victor's expression stopped him. "Okay, I'll tell him. But boss, if he takes this as an insult, then I'll handle it. But I'm not missing that visit, Marco. Not for Dmitry, not for anyone." After Marco left, Victor sat at his desk and stared at the photo Elena had sent. Sophia's face, scrunched up in concentration as she tried to figure out why her hands wouldn't cooperate. His daughter, who he'd held during her shots and rocked to sleep and watched learn to smile. He wasn't missing tomorrow. Whatever consequences came from making Dmitry wait, he'd deal with them. But he wasn't breaking the pattern of consistency he'd built, wasn't giving Elena any reason to doubt that he meant it, when he said nothing was more important than being their father. The next afternoon, Victor showed up at Elena's apartment at 1:55 with coffee and the bagels she'd mentioned wanting. She opened the door looking surprised. "You're early, again." "I didn't want to be late." "You're never late. I don't think you know how to be late anymore." She took the coffee and bagels, stepping aside to let him in. "Although you look terrible, did you sleep at all last night?" "A few hours. I have a difficult business meeting tomorrow that required some preparation." Elena's expression sharpened. "Difficult how? Dangerous difficult?" Victor hesitated, weighing how much to tell her. They'd promised honesty, but he didn't want to worry her unnecessarily. "Victor," her voice was firm. "We agreed. No keeping secrets that might affect us. A former business partner is in town and unhappy that I backed out of a deal. I'm meeting with him tomorrow to smooth things over." "Is he threatening you?" "Not directly, but he's not happy, and men in my former world express unhappiness in specific ways." Elena set down the coffee, her face pale. "Are we in danger? The babies and me?" "No. I've been very careful to keep you completely separate from my business dealings. He doesn't know about you or Lucas or Sophia, As far as anyone knows, I'm getting out because I want to retire, not because I have a family. But if he finds out, he won't. And Elena, this is exactly why I'm getting out completely, so that men like Dmitry Volkov are a problem I used to have, not one that affects our children. She studied him, fear and trust warring in her expression. You promise you're being careful, that you're not taking unnecessary risks? I promise. The meeting tomorrow is just conversation. I'm not walking into anything dangerous. Okay. She didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. But Victor, if anything changes, if there's even a possibility that we might be at risk because of your past, you tell me immediately, even if you think you can handle it alone. I will. I promise. Lucas chose that moment to start crying, his wails echoing through the small apartment. Elena immediately moved to pick him up, swaying gently as she soothed him. Someone's hungry and mad about it, she murmured. You want to feed Sophia while I handle the screaming monster? Victor had gotten good at bottles over the past 3 months, could prep and feed both babies without needing step-by-step instructions anymore. He settled into the familiar routine, letting the ordinary domestic rhythm calm the anxiety churning in his gut about tomorrow's meeting. Sophia latched onto the bottle immediately, her eyes locking onto his face as she drank. She'd started smiling recently, these big gummy grins that transformed her serious little face into pure joy. Victor lived for those smiles, found himself doing increasingly ridiculous things to earn them. You're staring at her again, Elena observed from the couch where she was feeding Lucas. She's worth staring at. They both are. I still can't believe we made them sometimes. Like, I look at them and think, how are you real? How did you come from me? From us? Victor corrected gently. They came from both of us. Elena's expression softened. Yeah, from both of us. They fed the babies in comfortable silence, a routine they'd done dozens of times now. Victor had learned to read Elena's moods, to know when she wanted conversation and when she just wanted quiet companionship. Today seemed like a quiet day, both of them processing the reminder that his past wasn't completely buried yet. After the babies were fed and burped and settled for their afternoon nap, Elena made tea and they sat at the dining table like they'd fallen into the habit of doing. I've been thinking, Elena said, wrapping her hands around her mug, about maybe getting a bigger apartment. The child support is more than enough to cover it, and they're going to need more space as they get older. That's a good idea. Do you want help looking? Maybe. I don't know. I'm still figuring out how to accept help without feeling like I'm giving up control. She paused. That probably sounds ridiculous. It doesn't. It sounds like someone who's still learning to trust after being hurt. Yeah. Elena took a sip of tea. Catherine says I should probably include you in major decisions like moving, since it affects visitation schedules and everything, but the idea of apartment hunting with you feels like too much too fast? Exactly. Like we'd be playing house or pretending to be something we're not. Victor understood. They'd built this careful structure over the past 3 months. Co-parents, not partners. Friendly, but not friends. Cooperating for the sake of the children, but maintaining clear boundaries about what they were to each other. Apartment hunting together would blur those lines. What if I help from a distance? Victor suggested. You look at places, send me photos and details, and I give you my opinion. That way you're still making the choice, but I'm in the loop. That could work? Elena looked relieved. Yeah, that could definitely work. And Elena, when you do move, I'd like to help with the cost. Not the rent. I know that's covered by child support. But moving expenses, deposits, furniture, for a bigger place. Let me contribute. That's... She stopped, clearly torn between pride and practicality. It's an investment in our children's living situation. Not charity, not control, just me paying my share of giving them a better home. You're getting very good at framing things, so I can't argue. I'm learning what battles are worth fighting and which ones are just my ego talking. Elena smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way that made Victor's chest ache. Okay. When I find a place and know what the moving costs will be, we'll talk about you contributing. Thank you. They talked for another hour about ordinary things. Sophia's pediatrician appointment next week, Lucas's preference for being held on the left side instead of the right, whether they should start looking into daycare wait lists, even though the babies wouldn't need it for months yet. Mundane parenting concerns that felt profound because they were discussing them together, making joint decisions, being partners in this one crucial thing, even if they weren't partners in anything else. Victor left at 5 p.m. feeling settled despite tomorrow's meeting looming. He'd handled men like Dmitri before. He could do it again, and then this would be over. One more loose end tied up, one more piece of his old life put to rest. Thursday morning dawned cold and gray, promising snow that hadn't yet started falling. Victor dressed carefully in a suit that conveyed power without being threatening, choosing his words for the meeting with the same precision he'd once used for negotiations worth millions. Dmitry Volkov was waiting in a private room at the Carlyle, surrounded by 4 men who were clearly bodyguards despite their expensive suits. He was a thick-set man in his 50s with cold eyes, and the kind of stillness that came from being absolutely certain of his own power. "Victor Russo," he said in heavily accented English, "you have been difficult to reach. I've been dealing with personal matters, but I'm here now." Victor sat across from Dmitry without being invited, a deliberate power play. "You wanted an explanation for why I backed out of the Moscow expansion. I'm giving you one meeting to get it." Dmitry's eyes narrowed. "You cost me money, cost me face with my organization. Men who walk away from deals with the Volkov family usually don't walk away breathing. I'm not walking away from a deal. I'm walking away from the entire business. There's a difference." "Why?" "You built empire. You have power, money, respect. Men do not walk away from this for no reason." Victor had prepared several explanations: retirement, changing interests, wanting to invest in legitimate businesses. All of them plausible, all of them designed to avoid revealing the real reason. But sitting across from Dmitry, Victor found himself tired of lying, tired of calculating every word, every gesture, tired of being the man who always had an angle. "I have children," he said simply. "Twins. I didn't know about them until 4 months ago, and when I found out, I realized I couldn't be their father while running the kind of operations you and I were planning." Dmitry stared at him like he'd started speaking in tongues. "You walk away from millions of dollars because of babies?" "Yes." "This is—" Dmitry said something in Russian that was probably not complimentary. "You are soft, weak. Children make men weak." "Maybe. Or maybe they make men realize what actually matters." Victor leaned forward. "I'm not asking for your approval, Dmitry. I'm not asking for anything except that you accept I'm out and leave me alone to live my life. I'll recommend buyers for my operations who can fulfill the Moscow contracts. You'll get your expansion, just with a different partner. And if I say this is not acceptable, if I say you made commitment and you will honor it, then I say no." Victor's voice was quiet, but absolutely firm. "I'm done with this world, Dmitry. I'm not coming back, not for money or threats or anything else. My children deserve a father who isn't looking over his shoulder, who isn't bringing danger to their doorstep. I'm giving them that, whatever it costs me." Dmitry studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something in rapid Russian to his men. They responded, what sounded like a brief debate, before Dmitry waved them to silence. "You're serious about this? About the children?" "Completely serious." "Then you are fool, but you are honest fool, which is rare in our world." Dmitry stood, and Victor tensed, ready for violence. But Dmitry just extended his hand. "I accept. You give me names of buyers who can fulfill contracts, and we are finished. No vendetta, no retaliation. You walk away clean." Victor shook his hand, relief flooding through him. "Thank you. Do not thank me. Just do not expect to come back if fatherhood becomes boring or difficult. You make this choice. You live with it." "I will." Dmitry and his men left, and Victor sat alone in the private room feeling like he'd just shed a skin he'd been wearing for 15 years. It was done. The last major tie to his old life severed cleanly. Dmitry would spread the word that Victor Russo had gone soft, had walked away for babies, and men in that world would either understand or think him a fool. Victor didn't care which. He pulled out his phone and texted Marco. "It's done." Dmitry accepted. "Start finalizing the buyer introductions and close out all remaining operations. I want to be completely out within the month." Then he texted Elena. "Meeting went well. No problems. See you tomorrow at 2. Her response came immediately. You're okay? I'm fine, better than fine. I'm free. He could almost see her smile through the phone screen when she replied, Good. Bring those chocolate croissants tomorrow. I've been craving them all week. Done. The next afternoon, Victor showed up with chocolate croissants, coffee, and a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Elena took one look at his face and smiled. It went well. Whatever that meeting was about, it really went well. It's over. All of it. I'm officially retired from my former life as of this morning. Elena's eyes widened. Really? Completely out? Completely. Marco is handling the last few transitions, but I'm done. Clean. Victor couldn't stop the grin spreading across his face. I'm just a regular person now. No empire, no operations, no danger following me around. Wow, that's incredible. Elena laughed, surprised and delighted. How does it feel? Terrifying and amazing in equal measure. I've been that person for so long, I'm not sure who I am without it. You're their father. That's who you are now. Yeah. Victor looked at where Lucas and Sophia were playing on their activity mat, batting at hanging toys with increasing coordination. Yeah, I am. They spent the afternoon celebrating in small ways. Elena let Victor stay past the usual time, let him help with dinner preparation while they talked about ordinary things. She told him about a new client she'd picked up, showed him sketches for a logo redesign. He told her about legitimate business investments he was considering, asked her opinion on which seemed most promising. It felt almost like old times before everything had fallen apart. But different too, healthier, more balanced, built on honesty instead of the unequal power dynamic that had characterized their marriage. I've been thinking, Elena said as they were cleaning up after dinner, about maybe being less rigid with the visitation schedule. Not changing it officially, just, if you want to come by on off days sometimes, or stay longer when you're here, I think that would be okay. Victor's heart jumped. Are you sure? I'm sure you've proven yourself. 3 months of perfect attendance, never late, always respectful of boundaries. You've shown me you're serious about this, about them. She paused. And honestly, they light up when they see you now. Sophia especially. She knows your voice, gets excited when she hears you at the door. I noticed that. Victor couldn't keep the wonder out of his voice. Last week she smiled at me before I even picked her up. Because you're her dad, and she knows it. They both know it. Elena smiled. You've built that relationship through consistency and time. That's exactly what I asked you to do. So what does less rigid scheduling look like? I don't know yet. Maybe you text me in the morning and say, can I come by this afternoon? And if it works for us, you come. Maybe we do weekend activities together sometimes, parks, museums, whatever. Maybe we figure it out as we go instead of having everything dictated by legal agreements. I'd like that. A lot. Me too. Elena started loading the dishwasher, her movements casual. And Victor, I've been thinking about the trust thing, about how you asked if I could ever really trust you again. Victor went very still. And I think I'm getting there. Not all the way, not yet. But I trust you with them completely. I trust you to show up, to put their needs first, to be honest about your limitations instead of pretending you have all the answers. She turned to face him. That's not nothing. That's actually pretty significant. It means everything to me. I know, I can see it does. She dried her hands on a towel, her expression thoughtful. I'm not saying we're going to magically become friends or anything. We're still figuring out what co-parenting looks like for us. But I think we're doing okay. Better than okay, actually. We are. Victor felt emotion welling up in his chest, threatening to spill over. Elena, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance when you had every right to shut me out completely. You're their father. They deserve to know you. She paused. And maybe I deserve to see if you're really capable of change. The Victor who divorced me, I couldn't trust him, couldn't build a life with him. But this Victor, the one who shows up with coffee and learns how to fold baby clothes and turns down dangerous business deals because he has visitation scheduled, this Victor is different. I'm trying to be better, every day. I can see that. And it matters. Lucas started fussing from his bouncy seat, his small sounds escalating. Elena moved to pick him up, but Victor was closer. I've got him. Victor scooped up his son, settling him against his chest with practiced ease. Lucas immediately quieted, his small body relaxing. Hey, buddy. You're okay. Just needed some attention, huh? Elena watched them with soft eyes. He loves being held by you. Both of them do. The feeling is extremely mutual. They spent the rest of the evening in easy companionship, trading babies back and forth as needed, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. When Victor finally left at 8 p.m., Elena walked him to the door. Text me this weekend if you want to come by, she said. No pressure, but the offer stands. I will, thank you. Victor made it to his car before calling Marco. How's the transition going? Smooth. The last buyers are lined up. Paperwork should be finalized by end of next week. After that, you're completely clean. Marco paused. I have to ask, boss. Any regrets? Victor thought about Sophia's smile, about Lucas falling asleep against his chest, about Elena's gradual softening toward him, about the life he was building that had nothing to do with power or fear or empires built on violence. None, he said firmly. Not a single one. Then congratulations. You're about to become a boring, legitimate businessman with nothing interesting on your resume. Sounds perfect. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Victor came by most days, not on any strict schedule, but whenever Elena texted that it was okay. He was there for morning wake-ups sometimes, stumbling through the door at 6 a.m. with coffee and the bags under his eyes that said he'd been up most of the night with legitimate business concerns instead of criminal ones. He stayed for dinner more often, helping cook or clean while they talked about their days. Slowly, carefully, they were building something. Not the relationship they'd had before. That was gone, dead, and buried with the divorce papers. But something new. Partnership built on mutual respect instead of unequal power. Friendship earned through consistency instead of assumed through marriage. It was better, healthier, real in a way their marriage had never quite managed to be. In March, Elena found an apartment she loved. 3 bedrooms in a better neighborhood, with actual security and a small park across the street. Victor looked at the photos she sent and immediately transferred money for the deposit and moving costs without her having to ask. She texted back, "That's too much. It's exactly what the deposit and first month require plus moving expenses." I calculated. You calculated down to the dollar? I wanted to make sure I gave you enough without giving you so much you'd argue about it. You're ridiculous. But I'm right. Unfortunately, yes. Thank you. Victor helped her move on a Saturday in late March, along with Elena's friend Rachel, who Victor finally met properly. Rachel was a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who looked at Victor like she was cataloging all the ways he could potentially hurt her friend. "So you're the famous Victor," Rachel said, shaking his hand with slightly more force than necessary. "Elena's told me a lot about you." "None of it good, I'm sure." "Actually, lately, it hasn't been terrible. Which is confusing because the first time she mentioned you, she called you an arrogant bastard who destroyed her life." Rachel smiled sweetly. "But apparently you're trying to be better. Don't prove her wrong." "I won't." "See that you don't. Because if you hurt her or those babies again, I know a lot of ways to make someone's life extremely difficult that don't technically break any laws." Elena appeared in the doorway of her old apartment, Lucas on her hip. "Rachel, stop threatening Victor. He's already terrified of disappointing me. You don't need to add to it." "I'm not terrified," Victor protested. "I'm appropriately concerned about maintaining trust." "That's a fancy way of saying terrified." But Elena was smiling. "Come on. We have a lot to move, and I want to be settled before the babies need their afternoon nap." They spent the day hauling boxes and furniture, Victor using muscles he'd forgotten he had. Rachel kept up a steady stream of commentary, interrogating Victor about everything from his business to his intentions to whether he knew how to change a diaper properly. "He's very good at diapers," Elena assured her. "Better than me sometimes, actually." "Impossible. Nobody is better at diapers than you." "I'm just faster," Victor said, carrying Sophia's crib past them. "Speed comes from practice." "Listen to him bragging about diaper-changing speed," Rachel said to Elena. "This is not the dangerous mob boss you described." "Former mob boss, and yeah, he's different now." By evening, the new apartment was mostly settled. Boxes were stacked in corners waiting to be unpacked, but the essential things were done. Cribs assembled, kitchen functional, beds made. Victor had intended to leave once the heavy lifting was done, but Elena asked him to stay for pizza, and he couldn't bring himself to say no. They sat on her new couch, one of the few pieces of furniture she'd bought new with the moving money Victor had given her, eating pizza while the babies dozed in their cribs in the actual nursery. "I can't believe they have their own room," Elena said, looking around the apartment. "For 4 months they've been sleeping 10 feet from my bed. This feels so grown up." "It's a beautiful place. You chose well." "I really did, didn't I?" She smiled, genuine and unguarded. "Thank you for helping, both with the money and the actual moving. I know that wasn't part of our agreement." "I wanted to be here. Wanted to be part of this." "I know, and I'm glad you were." Elena set down her pizza, her expression turning serious. "I need to tell you something." Victor's stomach dropped. "What?" "Nothing bad. At least, I don't think it's bad." She took a breath. "I've been talking to my therapist about forgiveness, about whether I can forgive you for the divorce, for cutting me off, for all of it. And she says forgiveness isn't about forgetting or condoning what you did. It's about releasing the anger so it doesn't poison me, about accepting that you made terrible choices, but you're making different choices now." Elena met his eyes. "So I've decided to forgive you, not because you've earned it necessarily, but because I need to let go of all that anger for my own sake." Victor felt something crack open in his chest, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Elena, let me finish. I'm forgiving you, but that doesn't mean I'm forgetting. It doesn't mean I trust you completely or that we're going to magically fix everything. It just means I'm choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past." "I understand, and thank you. I know I don't deserve it." "Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway." She smiled slightly. "My therapist says that's growth. I'm choosing to believe her." "Your therapist sounds very wise." "She is. You should probably get one too, honestly. You've got a lot to unpack about your father and your former life and why you made the choices you did." "I already have one. Started seeing him 2 months ago." Elena's eyebrows rose. "Really? Really? I figured if I'm going to change, I should probably understand why I was the way I was. Turns out I have some issues around control and fear of abandonment that led to some pretty destructive behavior patterns. We all have issues. At least you're working on yours." They finished the pizza in comfortable silence, then worked together to clean up. It felt domestic and normal, like they did this every day instead of this being a special occasion. "I should go," Victor said eventually. "Let you get settled." "Okay, but Victor?" Elena walked him to the door. "Thank you for everything. For showing up, for being patient while I figured out how to trust you again, for actually changing instead of just talking about it. You've proven yourself over these past 4 months. I'm going to keep proving it for as long as it takes." "I believe you." And the remarkable thing was, she seemed to mean it. Victor drove home that night feeling lighter than he had in years. The empire was gone, sold off piece by piece, until nothing remained but legitimate investments and clean money. His past was finally past. No more dangerous men making threats or demanding meetings. And Elena had forgiven him, was learning to trust him again, was building a new relationship with him based on who he was now instead of who he'd been. It wasn't perfect. He and Elena weren't together, might never be together again. But they were friends, partners in raising their children, people who respected each other and were slowly learning to navigate this new dynamic. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Over the next 2 months, Victor fell into a routine that felt like a life instead of an existence. He spent most mornings in his home office, managing the legitimate businesses he'd invested in: real estate development, tech startups, venture capital. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous, just normal business that required strategy and intelligence but didn't involve threats or violence. He spent his afternoons with Lucas and Sophia, watching them grow and change with remarkable speed. Sophia started rolling over, then sitting up on her own. Lucas found his voice and used it constantly, babbling conversations that made no sense but that Victor listened to like they were the most important words ever spoken. Elena relaxed more around him, let him into her life in small ways. He met her other friends, was invited to casual dinners where he was introduced as my ex-husband, the baby's father, with an ease that suggested she'd made peace with their complicated relationship. He helped her with grocery shopping, with pediatrician appointments, with the 1,000 small tasks of raising twins. He was there, consistently, reliably, without fail. In June, on a warm evening when the babies were 7 months old, Elena invited him to stay after dinner. They were sitting on her couch watching Lucas and Sophia play on their activity mat when she said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "About us. About what we are to each other." She turned to look at him. "We're not married anymore. We're not a couple. But we're not just co-parents either. We've become something else, something I don't have a word for." "Friends?" Victor suggested. "More than friends. Less than partners, somewhere in between." She smiled. "I guess we're figuring it out as we go." "That works for me. As long as I'm in your life, in their lives, I'm happy with whatever label or lack of label we use." "What if—" Elena stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. "What if what? What if someday we wanted to try again? Not now, not anytime soon, but someday if we kept building this trust and this partnership, what if we decided we wanted to be more than co-parents?" Victor's heart was suddenly hammering in his chest. "Are you asking if I'd want that?" "I'm asking if it's completely off the table. If the divorce burned that bridge permanently, or if maybe, in some hypothetical future, there's a possibility." She held up her hand before he could respond. "I'm not saying I want it now. I'm not even sure I'll ever want it. But I need to know if you've completely closed that door." "I haven't," Victor said quietly. "I've never closed that door. But Elena, I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm happy with what we have now, grateful for it. I don't need more if more isn't what you want. I know. That's part of why I'm even considering it as a possibility. Because you're not pushing, not trying to manipulate me back into a relationship. You're just here, being a good father, being a good friend, being someone I can trust." "I'm trying. You're succeeding." She looked back at the babies. "I'm not making any promises. I'm just saying the door isn't completely closed on my end either. Maybe that's something we can figure out together. Eventually." "Eventually" sounds perfect. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Sophia had grabbed one of Lucas's toys, and he was making indignant sounds about it, his small face scrunched up in outrage. Elena laughed and moved to referee, showing Sophia a different toy while returning Lucas's stolen property. Victor watched her with his children and felt complete in a way he'd never experienced before. This was what mattered. Not power or empires or money. This, family, however unconventional. Children who knew their father, a woman who'd learned to trust him again after he'd destroyed everything. It was more than he'd ever thought he'd have after signing those divorce papers 9 months ago. It was everything. That night, after Victor left and the babies were asleep, Elena stood in the nursery watching Lucas and Sophia sleep. They'd grown so much in 7 months. Were becoming little people with personalities and preferences and opinions about everything. And they had a father who loved them, who showed up for them, who'd completely changed his life to be worthy of them. Elena still had moments of doubt, still worried sometimes that Victor would revert to his old patterns, that the control issues would resurface, that he'd make unilateral decisions because he thought he knew best. But those moments were getting rarer. Because every time she tested him, every time she pushed back or set a boundary or questioned his choices, he listened, adjusted, did better. He was learning, just like she was learning to trust, to partner, to build something new from the ruins of what they'd destroyed. It wasn't the fairy tale ending where the divorced couple got back together and lived happily ever after. At least not yet, and maybe not ever. But it was real, honest, built on a foundation of respect and accountability instead of passion and power dynamics. It was better. 6 months later, on a cold December afternoon, Victor showed up at Elena's apartment with coffee and a nervous expression that she'd learned to recognize as him working up to saying something difficult. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong. I have something I want to talk to you about, and I'm not sure how you'll react." "Okay, talk." They settled on this couch while the babies napped, and Victor took a breath. I've been thinking about my living situation. I have this penthouse that's way too big for one person, and you have this apartment that's perfect for you and the babies, but doesn't have space for me when I'm here. Okay, Elena said slowly. What if we found a place together? Not as a couple, he added quickly, but as co-parents. A house maybe, something with enough space for everyone. Separate bedrooms, separate lives, but under one roof so I can be more involved in the day-to-day instead of visiting on a schedule. Elena stared at him. You want to move in together? I want us to live in the same house, yes, but with clear boundaries about what that does and doesn't mean. Separate spaces, separate lives, just more integrated co-parenting. Wow, that's a big step. I know. And if you're not ready or if it's too much too soon, I understand. But Elena, they're getting older. They're going to start noticing that Daddy doesn't live here, that I come and go on a schedule. And I want, his voice cracked slightly, I want to be there for bedtime stories and breakfast and all the ordinary moments I've already missed too many of. Elena looked at where the baby monitor showed Lucas and Sophia sleeping peacefully in their cribs. Thought about what Victor was proposing. Essentially roommates who shared children, living together, but not together. It should have sounded insane, should have felt like too much, too fast. Instead, it felt like the logical next step in whatever they were building. I have conditions, she said finally. Victor's face lit up with hope. Anything. We each have our own space, separate bedrooms, probably separate bathrooms. Common areas are shared, but our private spaces are private. Agreed. We're not telling people we're back together or anything like that. We're co-parents who live together for the children's benefit. Absolutely. And if it doesn't work, if we try this and it's too much or too weird, or it crosses too many boundaries, we revisit and figure out a new arrangement. No guilt, no pressure, just honest acknowledgement that we tried something and it didn't work. Fair. Elena took a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. Let's find a place together. Victor's smile was brighter than she'd seen in over a year. Really? Really? But Victor, this doesn't mean we're back together romantically. We're still figuring out what we are to each other. I know. And that's okay. I'm not pushing for more than you're ready to give. This is about being better parents, not about fixing our marriage. Good. As long as we're clear. They started house hunting the next week, looking for something that could accommodate their unusual living situation. Victor insisted on excellent security and a good neighborhood. Elena insisted on a yard and space for the babies to grow into. They found it in March, a 4-bedroom house in Brooklyn with a fenced yard, updated security, and enough space that they could each have their own floor if they wanted. The price was astronomical, but Victor paid cash without blinking. They moved in April, just before Lucas and Sophia's first birthday. The babies got a room each, something Elena insisted on because they need to learn to sleep separately at some point. And Victor and Elena took bedrooms on opposite ends of the hall. It was strange at first, living together but not together, learning to navigate shared spaces while maintaining separate lives. But slowly, gradually, they found a rhythm. Victor made breakfast while Elena got the babies dressed. She did laundry while he handled grocery shopping. They traded off dinner cooking and bath time and bedtime stories. They were a team, working together with efficiency born of mutual respect and shared purpose. And sometimes, late at night when the babies were asleep and the house was quiet, they'd sit together in the living room and talk. About their days, about their fears, about the people they were becoming. I never thought we'd end up here, Elena said one night. Living together again after everything. Me neither, but I'm glad we did. Me too. She smiled. It's not what I imagined my life would look like, but it's good, really good. Better than good, Victor said softly. It's everything I didn't know I needed. On Lucas and Sophia's first birthday, they threw a party in the backyard. Rachel and Elena's other friends came, along with a few of Victor's business associates who'd become genuine friends during his transition to legitimate business. Marco showed up with a gift bigger than either of the babies. Victor watched Elena laugh with Rachel, watched Lucas smash his face into a cupcake with gleeful abandon, watched Sophia study her slice of cake like she was planning an engineering project. This was his life now. Ordinary, domestic, completely foreign to the man he'd been 18 months ago. It was perfect. That night, after the guests left and the babies were asleep and they'd cleaned up the party chaos, Elena found Victor standing in the nursery watching Lucas and Sophia sleep. "They're getting so big," she whispered. "I know, I can't believe it's been a year. A year since that airport." Elena moved to stand beside him. "A year since everything changed." "Best year of my life," Victor said quietly. "Despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty and learning curve, best year of my life." "Mine too." Elena took his hand the first time she'd initiated physical contact in over a year. "We did good, Victor. We built something real." "We did." They stood together in the dim nursery, watching their children sleep, and Victor felt the last piece of something click into place. He wasn't the man who'd divorced Elena to protect her anymore. Wasn't the crime boss who solved problems with threats and money. He was just a father, a co-parent, someone trying every day to be worthy of the trust he'd been given. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. And somewhere in the future, maybe months from now, maybe years, he and Elena might figure out if they could be more than co-parents, more than friends, more than partners in raising children. But right now, this was perfect. This was whole. This was a family choosing each other every single day, built on honesty and respect, and the kind of love that grew slowly through consistency instead of burning bright and fast through passion. Victor Russo had spent 15 years building an empire on fear and violence. He'd spent the last year building a family on truth and trust. He knew which would last longer. He knew which one mattered, and he was finally home.